We're live. Hey, friends and fans. Today, my guest is the award-winning author, William F. Burk.
Hello.
William was born and raised in rural Northwest Georgia, where he spent most of his childhood exploring forests and pretending to go on all types of adventures. Exposed to fantasy at a young age through the Legends of Zelda, he began to constantly think up new ideas and slowly surrendered to his wild imaginations. Now he spends most of his time writing and giving into the muses that captivate him. He's the author of the Star Blood Chronicles and many other stories and poems. Wow, William, will you please introduce yourself to the audience?
I absolutely will. Yeah, so that's actually sort of pretty comprehensive of me. I began writing after a long time of like I said, exploring in the woods and stuff, mostly to my mother's dismay. As I was a 9-year-old, just kind of wandering in the woods, and she'd be like, "Where were you at?" But yeah, I do. I live in rural Northwest Georgia. I grew up here, and currently I'm, an independent author. And really, the bio is pretty pretty comprehensive. So there's, not much more to add to that.
Well, your current book, The Hearts of Hearts. Well, actually,
I did.
Yeah, that's actually one of two.
Yes, yeah. Well, The Heart of Hearts, so interesting. So The Heart of Hearts is actually one of 5. The first 2 books are out right now. The Heart of Hearts and The Phoenix Prince. Both of these are in a series I call Sword I. It's sword, then the /I. And so it's one of 5. The series that I have planned begins with The Heart of Hearts, and in order, it is The Heart of Hearts, The Phoenix Prince, The Eye of Revelation, which I'm working on now, The Starblood Key, and then lastly is going to be called The Orphan God. And those are the ones I'm working on right now as like a mainline series. I've done a little bit of other things here and there while writing this. I guess you'd call it a quintet. Anyway, yeah. So, but those have all just been sort of side projects. One of which would be the web novel that I have that I desperately need to update. Keep putting out chapters. It's called Angelica Demonica, and it was actually, believe it or not, it was actually a manga at first, a manga comic. The Angelica Demonica was, and it discontinued. It made it to its first volume, I believe, and then it discontinued. And so because I held the rights to it, I, a couple of years ago, I was like, why not just write it? So, yeah, those are the things. That's what I'm, that's my shtick. So,
I know what that's like. I started with a book, and marketing fell apart. They didn't do the marketing. They didn't do the editing. They did no quality control check on the print run. And then when I questioned it on it, they just cancelled. So,
oh yeah,
yeah, they just cancelled. They just said, "Oh, you're too problematic," And it's like, wow, I hate that. So
Yeah.
actually, I know how most people incur that word, but for me, I didn't occur in the political sphere. It's just occurred it for, basically pointing out fundamental flaws in most publishers. That
Oh yeah.
they don't make their money off the audience; they make their money off the author.
Yeah, exactly. That is something. I think that's something that's a very interesting point, because a lot of the times, I think more experienced writers, more experienced authors do kind of, and those who have dealt with the publishing world know this, but I think a lot of like aspiring writers don't understand the idea that the publisher doesn't want to make your dreams come true. They just want to make money.
They want to make their dreams come true.
Yeah, they're not
Yes.
there. They're not there. That's why you would need an agent, is because the publisher's not there to.
And
They
even
don't
then,
care.
the agent's only half in your camp.
Right. Exactly. Yes. Very much so. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of sad because yes, it is there. It's an artistic industry, very much so, but it's also very driven by money. It's cutthroat for sure.
Like, remember, less than 1% of authors make above 10,000,
Oh wow,
and
I
the
believe
top
it.
10 make 100 million to 200 million a year.
Jeez.
So it's heavily skewed. And then when you find out that most of these top authors, they don't make their money from their books, they make their money from the publishers themselves. So they're making their money off us.
Yes. Yeah.
So they have
Exactly.
no interest in having you succeed because that takes money off them.
Yes.
So I tell most people that don't believe your publisher, don't even believe your publicist, don't even believe your marketing
Oh
guy.
yeah. It's
They are
it's
only reaching into your pocket. If they fail, don't give them a second chance.
yeah, and a lot of the sad thing, and I always tell friends this when they do go into like a traditionally published deal, because Heart of Hearts is self-published, but
Yeah.
yeah. Anyway, I have dealt with publishers in the past, but one thing I always tell my friends is like, read your contract. 100% read your contract, because there's one big reason, and there's secondary sort of smaller reason, but the biggest reason to read your contract is you need to know where the rights are. You need to
Where the
know.
rights are, the expiry time, because if they
Yes.
have no expiry time, that means they own your book.
Yeah,
That's it. You're
exactly.
gone. Yeah.
Yeah, especially.
Artistic rights, if they own artistic rights, forget sequels
Hmm.
or spin-offs or merchandise.
Hmm.
They own it all.
Yep.
Publicity responsibilities, they could hit you up for $10,000 for a trip halfway around the world to publish your book, to do a publicity tour of some city you never heard of, but you
Right.
signed the contract.
Yeah. There was, yeah, that and they can also own your name, like William F. Burke. Like they could own that in the contract. And so
Yeah,
if that.
that's under trademarks and disputes, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you got
Yeah.
okay. You got rights, which is the rights to the book and spin-offs. Then I believe you have copyright holding. So if you don't own the copyright, basically they do.
Hmm.
So you've got the
Which is
rights.
a
You've
big
got
one.
copyright comes under rights. Then you have distribution, etc. But
Hmm.
then you have all the other stuff. Merch, sequels,
Yes.
publicity. You could be responsible, and editing. You could be responsible for any mistakes. You could be responsible for recalls.
Hmm.
And I've heard this recently happening. I don't know if this has happened widespread or not. They can hit you up for book. Um, um, what's it called? When you have the issue of the paperbacks, and then you got the reissue of second editions and so forth, right? They
Right.
can
Okay.
own your first editions and
Oh wow.
auction them. Yeah, they can take your first editions and auction them, and you get nothing from it, right? Because they
Right.
paid you whatever, and then you may only get paid after a certain amount of editions, and there are only a certain amount of runs per edition,
Yes. A
and you're
lot of the
responsible for
time.
any mistakes, any failure. So what they do is they get a bookshop, right, somewhere, say Portland, and buy 10,000 copies. and then they just sit on them, wait for a year to expire, and then bill you for those 10,000 books,
Oh,
which you
wow.
have to buy. And then they, by law, apparently in some countries, they take the covers off the books so they
Oh,
can't be
wow.
resold.
I did not know that. That I did not know. I knew about like the basic stuff. Like, yeah, I always tell people, I'm like, look
That
at the
comes under
rights.
distribution.
Because the biggest thing, like I think the biggest like bullet you can shoot yourself in the foot with would be international rights across all platforms. I mean, across all what's
Media
the
platforms, yeah.
yeah, across all platforms. Every like edition, as in like hardcover, like
First,
for the
second, third,
life of
yeah.
copyright, because the life of copyright, I don't in the United States, I don't know if it's
75.
universal. Huh?
US it's 75. Most countries, I believe it's still 50.
Yes, in the US it is. It's 75 after you die. So
Yeah. Which is how,
yeah.
and that's thanks to Disney.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
I did not know that.
They're the
Yeah.
ones who pushed copyright, um, because that's how they did it. Because they did that with, I think, Donald Duck or one of the other characters. They weren't originally Walt Disney characters. They were drawn by Walt Disney, but he didn't design them. But because he bought the copyright, and yeah, you
I
can,
did
and
not know
yet,
that.
yeah, Disney pushed it right back so that authors would expire and not even, and their children would expire and still not see a penny from the rights.
Yeah, that's insane. If you think about that, yeah, it's like it's not just you, it's your children. It's I mean, now not I mean, if it does, traditional publishing can work out for sure, but I think a lot of authors kind of have this idea, this sort of starry-eyed idea that if they get published by a publishing house, they've made it. And it's just not
No,
that. It's not that at
no.
all. And that's what I always tell people. I'm like, writing, being an author is hard, no matter how you go about it. It's hard.
We,
It's difficult.
of all the arts, we are the least valued.
Yeah. Well,
And
one
here's
thing
the
I think
thing:
about, one thing I
writing
always
is,
think about, like
yeah,
when I go to write a novel, like, or
yeah,
when I'm writing a chapter or something like that, like one thing I take into consideration is we are that, but it's because in a way, it's because we ask something great of the reader. And what I mean by that is if I paint a painting and it's in a museum, when you go and see that painting, within a fraction of a second whether you like that painting or not. But with an author and a book, I'm asking, you get my book, you buy my book. I'm asking like 8 hours of your life. And so that's where the artist to consumer relationship becomes a favor, because the unspoken agreement is you're going to support me by buying my book, and in return I'm going to give you a good story. And so I think about that a lot when I write. I keep the reader in my, like, the consideration of the reader in my mind, like how,
yeah,
they're giving me their time, so how can I make this interesting? That's actually something, that very question is something, whenever I get stuck on, like writer's block or anything like that, I always just stop, take a second, and I think, okay, how can I make this interesting? And a lot of the times, you think, immediately. A lot of the times, immediately, like, oh, well, if this happened, that would be interesting. And then it may go against your outline, or it may go against certain things, but as long as it's not a major plot change that changes the context of the entire story, it may change it slightly. I mean, as long as it doesn't, I mean, even if it does, even if it ends up changing something later on, it could be good. But what it is you just have to keep in mind, like, this person who bought this book is giving me their time. And because of that, it's my job, my responsibility as a writer to make it worth their while. And that's my mentality when I go into write is, how can I give the reader the best experience I can give them?
yeah. Now, you mentioned you realized you wanted to be a writer at an early age. A lot of people have. It's a bug, it gets under your skin. A true writer goes in knowing that you're the least valued in society. A lot of people see us as parasites. Yet yet if you get, yet you look at a big actor will earn more from one movie than most writers will.
Yes.
Yet without the writer, those people are meaningless muppets.
I always, I say I started writing at a young age. I have an interesting sort of relationship with writing in that it felt like being diagnosed with a disease. And what I mean by that was I had always loved stories, and even as a child, like I had written tiny little things, like something a kid would write. And I actually found one not too long ago. I don't know where it's at, but I was reading it and it was just hilarious. And I was like, this is so bad. But anyway, it wasn't until I was 17, I believe, that I had a teacher really give me the idea that writing had this sort of freedom to it. And I wrote Heart of Hearts in 2018, and it stayed on my computer for a couple of years before I decided to edit, get an editor and produce it. But when I say it was like having a disease, I didn't know I was a writer. But once I started writing and sort of got the idea of what this was, I looked back on my life and I was like, oh, I've always been a writer. So it was
Yeah,
sort of
once if you know what a writer is, you know you are one or not.
exactly. Actually, so I don't know if you've ever read the Shannara Chronicles by Terry Brooks. He's an American author.
Brooks.
He has a book called it's an autobiographical book. Dang, what's it? Oh, Sometimes the Magic Works: Lessons from a Writing Life, which it's part autobiography and then part like his process of writing, which Terry Brooks started writing in 77 with the Sword of Shannara, and
Yeah,
he
he's a
is still
well-known
writing
fantasy
today.
writer. Yeah,
Say what now?
yeah, he's well known.
Yeah.
Yeah,
He is one of my favorites, like of all time. But anyway, in his book, he talks about how like when he was growing up, him and his friends, when they were children, would play with action figures. Like they'd play with toy soldiers and stuff like that. And he said that one of the things about him, though, was that he got really invested in the story. And so while everybody's just playing, whatever with the G.I. Joes or whatever, he was making up backstories for them and stuff like that. And he talks about how like writing it's almost slightly pseudo genetic in how it's a mental thing. It's how your brain is wired, very much so.
yeah, it's a mental disorder.
I
But you
believe it.
consider this: writing is humanity's greatest achievement.
Yes. That's, okay. I'm glad you said that. So, one thing that interests me very much, and I guess it's really just an offshoot of me being a writer, but the thing that interests me so much is the idea of a story.
Yeah.
Because a story is something so very human. No other animal tells stories in that, we're drawn to them. Like if you look at ancient myths, we
Hmm.
ever we literally use stories to fill in the blanks of reality.
To
Uh,
just we use stories to pass on moral lessons. We use stories that we can make up to explain things. Yeah, but we also use stories, pure fiction, for our sanity.
yes, it's very interesting. Language in itself, the idea of language is very interesting because it almost like I am currently I started a few a little while ago, very very briefly, But I started on this sort of journey of mine where I wanted to approach the idea of language, and whether language was evolutionarily inevitable, or if language is by some weird way an anomaly. Uh,
That is a
that's
fundamental question, because you look at most animals, they make sounds, and the closest they get is whales with directions.
Mhm. Well, and another thing is language goes even further. So uh, there's a philosophical school called semiotics, and semiotics is the study of signs, symbols, and meaning. And that semiotics is essentially the crux of language, in that
Hmm.
I have my coffee mug beside me. So if my camera was working, I would say coffee mug. And because we have assigned a concept to those sounds coming out of my mouth, you would know this is a coffee mug. But
Yeah.
inevitably, it's arbitrary. It's an
Mm.
unspoken agreement in a psychosocial sphere.
Yeah.
Ferdinand de
The
Saussure.
evolution of and language underwent evolution from the let's see, the oldest languages, of which very few are still in use, are very bare basic,
Yes.
right?
Well, like if
Whereas
you think,
today's languages, you couldn't even use early languages to write with, because they lacked prepositions and tense, etc. They were in the moment.
yes, actually, the Western European languages are they're very indicative of that. You have the Romance languages, and you have Italian, which is essentially
The
Italian is
Romance,
modern
yeah.
Latin.
Yeah, it's very fundamentally cut down. It's although in some ways it's the romantic language, because it is poetic.
Yes, and then, well, like French and English share 80% of a lexicon, because they France and England were at each other's throats for most of their history, and
Yeah,
then
400 years they were enemies, and they've occupied each other, and to a point they still do.
yeah, well, and I think the most interesting Western European language for me is actually Spanish, because Spanish is a Latin language, a Romance language, but it has a heavy influence of Arabic,
And Celtic
because
root.
because the Ottoman Empire owned them for so long.
Well, actually, the thing is, the Spanish are originally Celts. Then they had the Roman era. Then they had the Ottoman era, and then they have the Catholic era. And the Catholic era introduced Italian, which altered the enunciation of many Spanish words.
Interesting. I did not know that. That's still
Yeah.
interesting. Stuff like that is so fascinating to me.
Mm.
Um, I don't know. I guess it was inevitable for me as a writer because I'm a
But
very
see, there are
curious
two types
person.
of evolution in language and in genetics. One is the natural evolution in isolation, like like the from Celt to Brit, right?
Hmm.
Then you have the intermixing in genetics. You have people mixing, and you eventually, races came together, Semites and Palrathians, etc., and they created modern Persians, etc. Because
Right.
they're all genetically mixed, right? They're not a single tribe, right? There's different tribes who mixed at different points in history. Same with languages, where Brit English came from first the Anglo, then the Norman, then the Saxon, and the Roman, and etc. They're like over a dozen occupations, and then you add the imperial influence, and that is the words from its empire coming into English as well, expanding it from about 10,000 words to 110,000 words.
That's very interesting.
And now you have the modernization of English where they're going through and filling all the gaps to make sure there is an English word for everything.
That's interesting. One of the things I read, or I'm still reading, one of the books I'm reading is called Courses in Literary Linguistics or something like Courses in Courses in General Linguistics. That's the word. Anyway, by Ferdinand de Saussure. And one of the things that really struck me early on in the book is he talks about how language exists inside of the social sphere and outside of the social sphere. In that his example was in that we speak a language and it exists inside the social sphere that way, in that it is in a language is this strange universal unspoken agreement that I'm going to talk to you like this, and you're going to, if you know what I'm saying, you're going to talk to me back in that way. So it exists inside in that way, but also it exists outside of us in that me and you, we speak English, but we don't know English comprehensively. We don't know everything about English.
No, we all know, and this is the funny thing, even throughout history, some of the greatest linguists and writers have only used around 6,000 to 12,000 words. So even as English has expanded, the literary world, it depends on your genre, right? If you look at this with manga, right? Different genres. They have. It's not just English. They have different Japanese.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Well, you have your social Japanese for your more feminine audience, and you have a much older Japanese for your male audience, and you can hear the difference.
Japanese is it's interesting that you mentioned Japanese. So Japanese, there are there's so many kanji, but most people only use about 2,000 of them. And then the thing about Japanese that's so interesting is that so a couple things about Japanese. One, Japanese is very concrete grammatically because it uses particles. And because of the use of particles, it's grammatically, it's very, I don't say easy to navigate, but it's very tangible.
Well, it's in the
as
now.
Like compared,
everything,
as like compared. Well, I was going to say as like compared to like English or Spanish, because Japanese only has 4 tenses. They don't have a future tense. It's just past, present, negative past, negative present. But what I was going to say was Japanese is completely orchestrated around who you are talking to and your relationship to that person.
Yeah. That's why, and you have enunciations as well as variations of the kanji. So if you have a male-only audience, you will use the aggressive. If you have a female audience, you use the passive. I'm talking about the enunciation, like the softer of the vowel.
Yeah. Like one would be the part. Well, you don't. If we were chums, I guess. One of the particles I would use would be the da particle, which is because Japanese doesn't have a verb for to be. There is no to be in Japanese. There are 2. There's iru and aru, which are they both mean to exist.
Yes.
They mean to exist.
Is and are. That's like is and are.
Well, it's actually
it will be.
Japanese is a strange language because it's so like. Okay, let me start from the beginning because I know I can text in Japanese.
Fraction,
Anyway,
I know fraction, and from my understanding, is that you can learn conversational Japanese, which is the vast majority of Japanese use, and it's designed for 12-year-olds.
Well, so
we're talking about modern written and spoken Japanese without variation.
Because I'm trying to think. Okay, so Let me start from the beginning where I was so I don't lose my
Yeah.
thoughts.
Yes.
So
Sorry.
no, you're fine. So Japanese is fundamentally different than, I'll say, English, because that's my mother tongue. So it's
Yeah.
fundamentally different from English in that there are two major differences. The first would be that there is no verb for to be. That
Right.
verb does not exist. There are um, the words iru and aru, but those do not mean to be. They mean to physically exist.
Right.
Whereas the verb to be in English, I am,
Yeah.
you are, blah, 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 can also represent like the metaphysical existence. Like I am, I think, therefore I am. That
Right.
am does not exist in Japanese. They use particles. The second biggest difference is English is this weird, quirky language, whereas in order to create a thought, we have to have a subject, even if the subject doesn't refer to anything. So, like if I say it's raining outside, the verb there, it's, is what you call a dummy subject, in that it doesn't refer to anything. It's just that it doesn't exist. It's raining. Well, it
No.
has no
Well,
actual
it is
value.
the all-purpose incumbents of existence.
It's just
Subject is existence. Yes.
yeah, but it has, like, if you were to give it, like,
Yes.
I am, if I said, like,
Yeah.
I am Will,
Yeah.
the value of I is me, right?
Yeah.
But if I say it's raining, it has no real value.
No, in
Like,
most
it has no real
languages it would be
concrete
weather,
value.
raining.
Yeah, but
Or
in
just
Japanese,
raining. Yeah.
so in Japanese, you only need a verb, and
Yes.
the Japanese is what you call a context-based language, in that most of the time there is no subject. There Now they have two particles. There's the wa particle and the ga particle. Now, the wa particle is what you call the topic particle. The ga particle is what you call the subject particle, but they are not one for one with English.
No.
The wa particle is essentially saying this is the topic of the sentence. So, like, if I were to say today, and I'm talking about today, I
Yeah.
would be like, kyo wa ame ga furu, which is like saying today it's raining. But the wa there, I might have said ga, but what I meant was wa. The wa there is like saying, as for today, it's raining.
Yeah.
Whereas ga would be like, I don't know, you would say something like boku ga, which would be boku, as in I am, the one that, the rest of the sentence. They're not one for one with English. It's Japanese is a very, very interesting language, especially coming from an understanding of Western European languages. I
Now,
can't speak for Eastern European languages. That's because I don't know anything about them. Is why I keep saying
no.
Western European. But
But I do
yeah,
know with most Asian languages they are tonal, whereas with Japanese, yes, they use tone to set the mood and the relationship. Like,
yes, not as much as like Korean. Korean is big on that. Japanese has
yeah, but
slight
remember,
intonation.
in the order of languages, you have the original Shino language, then you have Korean, Japanese,
Yes.
Vietnamese, and then down Thai, Malay, etc. And the further you get away from, Korea, the lower and the younger the language, right?
Mhm.
But the original Shino languages started in like central China, Tibet, Zan, and they circled round like a big spiral outwards.
Yes.
So Japan was a middle period language. Japanese is a middle period language, whereas Thai and Malay and all that are more modernized.
Hmm.
And they're far from their roots, you know. So when it comes to human expression, and this is happening in Japan too, they are trying to modernize for an international audience. So a lot of their stuff that they used to have in their roots and then still teach their roots, they have what's now called a modernization. And this is what's taught, from it's like, I forget what they call it in Japan, but it's up to age 12. And this is the Japanese they also teach internationally because it's faster and easier to teach and because the majority of Japanese can understand you and even just give you the basic replies, and they know from if you're using certain words, you won't know other words. You know what I mean? Because you're
Right,
using the
right.
basic forms.
Yeah. It's kind
And
of
that's something you don't have in English. You don't have, although we do with synonyms, you have a very simple, do have a sort of simplified English, but not as much as I would say simplified Chinese or simplified Japanese.
Yeah, Japanese is very so like I think, you always have textbook language. So you always have textbook language,
Yes.
and textbook language is almost across the board different than how it's used.
Oh,
How the
absolutely.
actual language is used. One thing about Japanese that's very interesting is a lot of the times when you're speaking casually, you shorten words.
Yeah.
So, like the word for good morning, Ohio, is sometimes just shortened to Oha. Like they love to shorten words. It's very interesting, and like one of the things is like even in polite speech, where you'll
Yes.
have "Ohayo gozaimasu" like that. Sometimes it'll just be "Waimasu" like that. It's just like a
Yeah. Yeah.
very
Yeah.
quick thing because they shorten things.
Yeah.
Um,
I've noticed that with particularly a lot of animes that like it used to be like the Japanese would be longer than the English translation, but because of modernization, it's very. Wait a minute, the lips are they've stopped moving and the text is still up.
right, right, right. Yeah, and the thing about that is, um, Japanese, when you're translating, especially when you're translating into English, you'll find that Japanese says a whole lot in very little because it's a
Yeah, because
context-based language.
yeah,
And
but you have
everything,
words with long multiple meanings, and it's hard when it's written to translate. I've been told that it's harder to translate the written than it is the spoken.
uh, it's, it's, I think probably, maybe, I really don't know, but because it's, context-based, a
Yeah,
lot of the sentence is filled in your brain just by the context
yes,
of it. So,
yeah,
like with them
yeah,
not needing a subject, and so like that's why in anime you'll see like the subtitle says something way longer than what they said. It's because in English we when we speak, we have to tell you that context because you're not just going to rely on it because our language doesn't, it's
yeah.
not built that way as a mechanism. And
That's
so,
true. But we do have hidden. Yet in English, we do have the hidden context built into from the original Brit. Where in the original Brit, if you said uh, something often enough, I forget exactly how it's framed. It's like if you grow up every day saying instead of go over there and fetch water, right, and eventually go fetch would it would just be go fetch and
right.
right and but over time that has been lost. That context by repetition in English has been lost, or implied English. Um, I guess a lot of implied English also is very hard to explain because you actually have to have a context to
Yes, you have to.
reference it.
Yes, that's a good point because in English you would have to have a physical in the room context, whereas
Yeah, and
Japanese,
it's built up where, like I'm saying, it's also built up over
yes,
time. Where if we spoke often enough, we would have implied context between us, and somebody listening in will say, "What are they talking about?" And we would know the context, but they won't, because we won't say the context, but we think we have.
Yes. Now, yeah, exactly. In English, if I came into the room and you were sitting down at your computer typing, I would say,
Yes.
"Are you writing?" While that is you writing. So verb are you, verb are you is the subject, writing. No, wait, hold
But
on,
the
wait.
implied part is, are you in the process of writing?
Well, what I was going to say in Japanese, it would be what would it be? Takimasu ka? It would just be writing. That's how you would translate it. Writing?
And it would be question, and the question would be implied, yeah.
Yeah,
But in English,
it
the
would be
question is,
implied.
are you in the process of writing? And over time, this is where implied English actually has built in. Often we don't use process,
Yeah,
or
well, because we have the present progressive.
yes,
Yeah. Our language has,
there
well,
are parts
Japanese
of
is,
English that we don't use anymore. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Whereas in
yes.
Japanese, they've progressed further, which is interesting for a middle, because English is an old language, yet Japanese is a Middle Kingdom language, and yet it's far more progressed.
Yeah. 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 It's, yeah. Well, also, like, one of the things about Japanese is comparatively, while yes, of every language has influences, comparatively, Japanese has far less influences than English. English has, it's a Germanic language with French, Greek, Latin. We have
There are 12
we're a
roots.
strange of
Yeah,
amalgamation of a language,
yeah, because what we
a
have 12
Frankenstein.
roots and over 26 different external influences. We don't even use our own alphabet. We use
Right,
the
right, yeah,
Phoenician alphabet. And
yeah,
we use the Arabic numerical system.
yes, we do. Um,
And the
yeah,
Celts never had a concept for zero. That came, I think, from the Roman era.
I know
No,
zero
yeah, I think
came from
Romans introduced
the
null to
Arabs.
Britain. Yeah.
Yeah, zero came from the Arabs. They're the ones that
Yeah, but it
discovered
came
algebra.
through Rome into
Oh
England,
yeah,
not
I see what
yeah,
you're saying. Yeah, 100%.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I see
I'm
what you're saying.
saying the Romans introduced the concept of null, but I'm saying that later we went from Roman numerals to Arabic numerals,
Yes,
because we already had that concept of null. It was quite easy to transfer over to a much simplified writing system.
yes, and thank goodness for that, because math class would be horrendous with Roman numerals.
We actually, we actually did a maths course in advanced calculus. You actually have to do there's an old calculus that is actually done in Roman numerals.
Oh man,
Yeah,
that sounds
it's
wild.
man, I we had a weird professor. I'm telling you, we had a weird professor. Like, you want to know the roots? Just starts off. You know roots of mathematics, and puts an eye on the screen.
Yeah, I
And from there
remember.
it went downhill.
Yeah, I was never very. I'm not a very I'm not a very math minded person.
We spent
I'm
most of our computer course doing mathematics, and that's when
Yes,
I learnt
that's the thing.
that.
Like I was saying about
Yeah,
JavaScript,
yeah,
that's the thing that can, because I find, in the way that I find spoken languages interesting, I find programming languages just as fascinating. But yeah, no, math boggles my mind a lot. I
yeah.
remember I had a teacher that I would mess with back in high school, and I just remember very vividly. She would be like, "All right," she goes, "Okay, today we're going to learn about imaginary numbers." I was like, "Oh, so we're just making them up now?" like, like,
Well, yeah, well, there are a series of numbers, because they're so complex, that they are called imaginary numbers, because you just
yes,
they're just too complex to explain
Right,
to
right.
in like a short period of time. But they all
I
have
had
mathematical uses.
when I speaking of mathematics, so when
Yeah.
I was a teenager, I'm 31
Mm,
now. When I was a teenager, most of my preteen to teen life, I was really into Taekwondo.
yeah.
And I remember one of the guys that took Taekwondo with me, much older guy, ended up being the president. I don't say president. I guess I'd say head of the math department here at one of the local universities. I don't know if
Right.
you ever heard of Berry College, but it's the largest. It's actually the largest college campus in the world.
Oh,
Um,
I didn't know that because I assumed it was Oxford. Then until I found out it's actually a bunch of small campuses.
yes, well, Berry's interesting because most of it is unused land. It's kind of what's the word,
Yeah.
conservatory.
Mm,
But there's tons of hiking trails and stuff. But it was started by a lady named Martha Berry, and it was back in like I guess the beginning of the 20th century. And she would they called them the gates of opportunity, which has
yeah.
fallen very, very. I don't know if you know how expensive American college is, but
I
anyway,
I have some idea. Yes.
yeah. But back in the day, you could go work there
Mm,
and get your education. You could get
yeah.
your education as you worked, but money rules
Until
everything.
until um, the freeing of the market, as they called it, in the 80s, which was bipartisan. You can't blame anybody. You can't blame Reagan. It's basically everybody had their different opinion on how education should proceed. The idea was that only the rich could afford the idle time to go to university, right?
Right,
Because you, even if you were poor, right, your parents could only afford one out of two kids to go to college. And America had a lot of colleges that were not at full capacity. Like Yale had 6,500 students with 10,000 hall capacity, right?
mm,
There
okay,
were not, but it wasn't just Yale. It was every university had empty seats. They couldn't, and because people had to work could only go to university part time. They had to work. They thought this would carry over if they would just fund the empty seats, right? Find
right,
people to go to those funding empty seats. But colleges kept upping the tuition and it just spiraled out of control
yeah,
with the campus cost exploding in the
yeah.
90s you remember when insurance went from like a few dollars to a few $100, right?
Oh
People
yeah.
were people used to buy life folks once upon a time used to buy life insurance for $1 a day.
Oh wow. I have life insurance, but it's my day
Like
job.
hundreds of dollars, yeah. It's like
Well,
hundreds of
my
dollars
day
a year,
job,
yeah.
I'm a security guard, so
Yeah.
I think legally I have to have life insurance. And
Well,
so
you
they
it's
give it to
called
me for
yeah,
free.
but there are different types, but the one you have is not the same as the colleges have,
Oh
right?
no 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 no.
No,
I
but
yeah
yeah,
no.
you understand that
Right.
their college campus insurance like has to cover up to 20 million
Wow.
per student. So they are paying out an enormous amount in every year in fire and other general and medical insurance, right?
Right right.
And it goes into a huge pool. So every time it's not used, it has slowly brought down the cost, but every time it's used, the reductions it just starts to go up again until so that's why it's ballooned because in the 2000s once the lawsuits exploded, you know,
Hmm.
and stuff you research when you write, right? When you write,
Right right. Yeah yeah yeah
you
yeah. There's
just
the
research so much stuff and you just find out that it's not one party, it's not one person, it's a whole bunch of people in states and courts. And once you realize how complicated it is, you just like understand how the entire system is a piece of Jenga. And somebody is bound to pull a piece that will collapse eventually.
It's I think it's funny that you say that about research as a writer. I will
Yeah.
tell you something. I do so little research.
Some people
Because
do.
mainly because I don't really like with my world building or I guess research would mainly a lot of the times be for world building unless you're writing unless you're doing like some sort of historical fiction that would you would need to study like individuals. But anyway, my world building is I don't base it off of like a single or even an amalgamation of real like I don't study like the Roman Empire. I
Yeah.
just sort of kind of just make it up as I go along. I was talking to a friend actually. I had an interesting conversation. She actually got picked up by Titan Books, which is an independent publisher.
Yeah.
But she's writing her second novel. The first one hasn't come out yet, but you know how a publisher is. They're go, 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 go. Give me the second one. And so she's writing the second novel, and she's like, I just want this to be over. And I was telling her, I was like, it's kind of funny because when you're writing the first book, you have complete liberty to do whatever you want. But when you're writing the second, third, whatever, you have a foundation. So now you're each book is slightly more limiting than the last book because you're slowly building up. Like for instance, a magic system. When you're building a magic system, you're essentially creating rules, and then throughout you create these rules for magic, and then throughout the story, to make it interesting, you're constantly trying to find those loopholes because the reader learns how this magic works. Oh,
As
well,
fast as you wrote it. Yeah.
yeah. The reader knows how this magic system works because they're reading the book and they go, oh, this happens, this spell does this or something like that. I don't know. But then your job is to find the loophole that will throw them off. Because at that point, if they know how the magic works and you just abide by the rules, well, that's rather boring. And so when you create these rules and then you find a way, even if slightly, you find a way to bend those rules, that institution that you've created finds its interesting little hiccups. And those little hiccups are, in my opinion, the thing that make a magic system so fascinating.
Which is why they have what's called soft and hard. Soft magic, there are very little rules and they can be changed. Whereas hard magic it's physics, Jim. It's physics.
Yeah, I think I think probably my books go towards the hard magic. I'm very like I love to. One of the things I love to do is I love to base my magic somewhere in science somewhere like for instance one of the characters in The Heart of Hearts, she's an ice mage, and so like one of the quirks about her is that she never gets cold, and then one of her like defense mechanisms is that she can drop her body temperature, making it to where it's hard to touch her. You'll get frostbite if you touch her. But because she's lowering her body temperature, her body gets harder. So she becomes a little more brittle under certain stress. And yeah, something like that. Or like for instance, if a character like in Angelica Demonica, you think like if a character can manipulate physics, like for instance, if a character has complete control of physics, can they destroy light? Stuff like that. But I like to base things a little bit in science every now and again. I look at it like it's not even that I
Well, in science,
aim
there's the
for it
concept
in
of
that
the
way.
anti-weight.
Say
Yeah.
what now?
In science, there is the concept of the anti-wave. That like audio, like that's how audio canceling systems work.
Okay. Yeah.
You
I
isolate the
just think
waveform and
like when I
put an
make a
optical.
magic,
Yeah.
when I make a like a magic ability, I just kind of think like, how would this work in real life?
Hmm.
Like what it like I think my thought process is, okay, if someone had this power in real life, what are the extents to which this power can be used?
Yeah. Yeah.
I get a lot of, I said my first project was a manga. I get a lot
Mm.
of inspiration from manga, a lot of it, because manga was my first love, very much
Hmm.
so. I remember, I would read it. I remember my friend, she got me the volume 1 of One Piece. That actually, going back to the questions you had in the email you sent me.
Yeah. We're long past those.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, 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 no. We can go back.
Yeah.
Anyway, the one, what was it? It was about when did I know I wanted to write, or something like that. When
Yeah.
did I
Well.
know?
Yeah. When did you know you? When did you realize you wanted to be a writer?
I think it is. I think it is twofold.
Mm.
I think that I think I wanted to be a writer. I think I wanted to be a writer the moment I saw, or I mean, the moment I read One Piece, Ichiro Oda's One Piece. Do you know what One Piece is, right?
If you're an anime fan, of course.
Okay, so One
Yeah.
Piece follows the story of Monkey D. Luffy
Yep.
on his journey to become the king of the pirates. And so what it is there's
Kubo.
this treasure. There was a
Yep.
man named Goldie Roger who was the king of the pirates, and on his on the gallows before his
Yeah.
execution, he says that his treasure
Well,
is out for the taking, and he left it all in one place. And this treasure is called the One Piece. And so
yeah.
because of that, because of Goldie Rogers, saying that his treasure's out there, it causes this massive era of pirates and people seeking glory to go and find this treasure. And then Luffy, Monkey D. Luffy, the main character, the story is about him and his journey to find the One Piece. And in this, like the I guess the caveat there would be that Monkey D. Luffy there are these fruits called devil fruits, and when you eat them, you gain some sort of magic ability, but you can no longer swim, and uh, seawater saps your energy. So he's a pirate. He ate the gum gum fruit and he becomes a rubber man. He has the ability to stretch himself like rubber. Uh, um, but he can't swim anymore. So he's a pirate that can't swim, and that's sort of But anyway, when I read One Piece for the first time and I got a little into it, a little further into the series, I had the inspiration of like, I want to do this too. Like I want, and I even say this, I do this sort of podcast thing I call CarCast, where I just, I do it on my commute to work because I have a long commute to work. And so I'll just start talking. And, you know, uh, one of the things I said was, and I just lost it. Um, where is it? Yeah, it was that I want to do this too. It was that the sort of like idea that, you know, the way One Piece made me feel, uh,
Yeah.
I wanted to make other people feel that way. And what I was going to say about the CarCast is I have, as a writer, sorry, I didn't mean to, anyway, as a writer, I have a very simple mission. And that is, if you read my book and you put it down and you say, well, that was a rather pleasant story, I'm happy. That's it. That's all I want, is to just, I had a friend ask me, she said, hey, we were talking about writing, and it was back when I had first decided to script the manga. I didn't draw it. It was drawn by an artist. Her name is Colorless on Twitter. Anyway, this friend of mine, she was like, "Well, why do you want to write?" She was like, "You need to figure out why you want to write." And the answer was very simple for me. It was, I want to entertain people. I have no brand. Like, as a writer, I don't have like a grand errand. It's simply that I just want to write something that I think someone will enjoy.
There's two manga artists. I can't remember their names, but it's, I think it's a similar answer to Detective Conan and One Piece, where they both basically they had the stories kicking around their head, and they got to writing and drawing, as manga artists have to do. And after the initial pitch, they couldn't stop.
Yeah.
Like,
well, I mean,
and I think with One Piece, it was like he had the whole. By the time they come around to asking him to come back in, he had all this. He came in with a big bundle, and they were just so impressed. You know,
Ichiro Oda is he's a madman. He's a modern day he's a modern day Van Gogh in a way, because he's just like he initially planned for the series to last about 5 years, and then he created the Warlords of the Sea, which are these characters that basically they're politically immune. They're politically immune to the Navy. And so when he created these characters, he created them by accident, really. And then when he did that, he thought, oh no, there's no way this is going to last 5 years. One Piece is still going on right now, and it was first published in 1997.
Yeah.
And so Oda
but there's also Detective Conan. There's a couple of others who are a lot older. Of course, you go back to Pokemon, the original Pokemon. Well, I don't think it started as a card game or a video game. It started as a cartoon caricature.
Well, actually, so Pokemon's interesting. Satoshi, who I don't actually know his whole name, but Satoshi, who created Pokemon, he created Pokemon because as a child he collected beetles.
Yeah,
like he had like a bug collection, and that was what gave him the idea for Pokemon. Was that he liked collecting these different little creatures, and he's an interesting character. He's very eccentric. I don't think he does interviews or anything like that.
Not since 90s, I don't think. I think he's only given a few.
He's very interesting.
But so is the guy behind One Piece. But of course, to see the interviews, you have to get this. Yeah, got to hunt. But
Oda does not. There's only like a few pictures of Oda's face. He's very secret. That's a very now. I will say, he works. So Oda has this banana schedule. He wakes up at 3 a.m. and works till 12 a.m. And like I think he understands what he has, because One Piece is really it's a modern classic. It's outsold. One Piece has outsold Batman in popularity.
One Piece is one of the few pieces of art in the 100 million club.
Yeah, I mean it's
that is 100 million copies sold during the artist's lifetime.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's a worldwide, like it's phenomenal, but it's One
more
Piece
translated.
Will be remembered.
Yeah, it's translated into 100 languages.
Oh, I believe it. It's the most successful manga ever. By number. It has outsold Batman. I think Oda
In
is
theoretical value, it's worth more than Disney.
oh man, I did
In
not know that.
theoretical value, you can look it up. It's worth more than most franchises in the West.
Wow. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
crazy. It will
yeah,
be like it's one of those things that it will when it's done, when it's over, it will be remembered. It'll be it's a modern classic. It really
yeah.
is.
But
Um
it will be studied for it. Forget Boyance. Study this guy, and yeah,
oh yeah. Well, a lot of like yeah, he has Oda. So one thing about Oda is he has a beautiful way of subverting the shonen genre. Uh um in that, like for instance, when a certain character transforms, instead of because well, like he subverts it in this way. So typically in the shonen genre, when there is the modern shonen genre, when there is a transformation of some sort, like in Bleach, when Ichigo undergoes his holification, what happens is the um, the scene becomes intense because what the writer is trying to do is the writer is trying to increase tension and make things serious.
right.
They're like, okay, this is serious now. Whereas Oda, with certain transformations, does the opposite. He'll make something lighthearted or something silly. But what it
He
ends
is
up
a master
doing,
of comedy.
yes, Oda actually. So in initial interviews, when he was asked why he gave Luffy such a strange power, the ability to, he's essentially a rubber band. Oda said that the reason he did that was because he didn't want the reader to become too stressed, and so he that was his thing, is he wanted to make something slightly silly. And like if you think about One Piece, like it's always been about I think the core values of One Piece are freedom and happiness. Uh, like even when
Well, dreaming. Yeah, dreams. You have dreams. Freedom to
yeah, you
pursue
have
your dreams.
dreams,
Yeah,
and like Luffy wants, his whole thing is, he wants to be free, because he even
yeah,
says that like the king of the pirates is the person who is the freest in the world. Um,
yeah,
yeah, and it's dreams, and it's an upbeat thing. And while it does have One Piece is very much the world building is very much a dystopia, but
yeah, yeah,
the beautiful thing about it is, like, there is like for instance, when Roger finds the One Piece in the flashbacks of when Roger finds the One Piece, the thing is it's not this like intense, moment of revelation or whatever. It's just he just laughs. He
right.
finds this grand treasure that, the whole story is built around, and when he sees it, he just laughs. And so he
Yeah,
names the final island, he names it Laugh Tale, because it's such a funny story. And that's a very beautiful thing that Oda does, is he subverts the genre from it being this intense, dark, into this thing that's very optimistic and very
yes,
hopeful.
yeah. And that's my inspiration, by the way. Spoiler alert: I've made a cheerful dystopia, and very few pick up on it.
Mine is, I don't really know. Mine is very politically unstable, I guess I
Yeah,
could say.
yeah. But the thing is,
So
I hardly use any magic.
really,
It's so subtle. I hardly use it.
I
It's
am.
it's like an everyday tool, like it's used often, but it's stuff like, oh, I'm going to cleanse myself, or I'm going to detox, or I'm going to.
Okay, gotcha,
There's
gotcha.
yeah. There's no. It's like, oh, I want a pair of shoes. I'll craft it, and when he means for crafting, he's actually magically assembling.
Okay.
It's just an everyday thing. It's a total. And I think the subtleties of some of the things that I did were maybe too subtle, went over people's heads. But Yeah, spoiler alert, he's demonically possessed. That's how he answers questions before they're
Yeah,
asked.
so my villain, his
Yeah.
name is his name is the end of the world. Uh,
Ah,
and yeah, so
sounds
far,
like Zero.
so far, my biggest, I'm gonna sort of reveal it in this book,
Yeah.
but my biggest secret so far is his motivations. You don't know for the first book, second book, really even part of the third, most of the third book. Everything he does seems arbitrary and random. And my editor
Yeah.
asked me, she was like, "What does he want?" I was like, "You'll never guess it."
Like, I think one of my mistakes was I didn't reveal the enemy, and I only revealed uh, hints of their existence as mentions of the chosen few, or
Right. Well, my
and
whole the thing that isn't a spoiler at all is because it's actually online because I narrated it. But so the Starblood Chronicles, it's based around a myth. So one of the things I like to do is I like to create original myths,
right,
and I usually will create myths and base the world around that myth. Kind of like that. That'll be the premise. The premise is
yeah,
this is a myth. How does it react to the rest of the world? And so the core of the Starblood Chronicles is that the cosmic tree always existed, and then what happened was the cosmic tree, for some reason, bears fruit, and then that goes into that offshoots into the poem of the two fruit. It was what is it? In the beginning, there were two fruits, one among the leaves and one beneath the roots. And then, so going back, so there's the cosmic tree, and it has a fruit. One of the fruit lives, one of the fruit is stillborn. The fruit that lives, what he decides that he's going to create life. So this sort of like pseudo god, his name is One, and One decides that he's going to create life. So he creates the angels, and the angels, uh, they want power. They say, give us dominion over the universe. So he creates the angels, and they want power, so he gives them power. Then he creates the beast folk, and they're animals, but they see the angels and they see how beautiful the angels are, and they say, give us beauty like the angels. So he gives them the ability to shift into humans. He gives them human beauty, and then not humans. He gives them like humanoid beauty. Anyway,
yeah,
then he creates the Darklings, and they're essentially dark elves, is what they are. Um, they have like dark blue skin, pale green eyes, and white hair. Anyway, and they say, teach me the secrets of the universe, and so he gives them knowledge, and then he gives them basically knowledge and psychic power, and then he creates the humans, and the humans see everything else, and they say, why don't you give us power? And so after all this god is like, everything I create just wants more than what I give it. Everything that I create wants more.
hey,
And
so gotta
so
give me.
yeah. And so what happens is he becomes sad. It makes him sad, and he goes away. And then what happens is he goes away into the garden, and doesn't I don't know how much time passed in between the creation and this point, but um what happens is this young girl, a human, so she has no power whatsoever. This young girl comes to One in the garden. She's the only one that comes to him, and she just cries, and she's like, thank you. Thanks for giving me life. Thank you for letting me live. And she, out of everything he created, she's the only one who was thankful for what she had. And because of that, he gives her this power. He gives her the greatest power of all. He says, I will breathe the stars into your veins. And she becomes the first starborn. So the Starblood chronicles her lineage from the dawn of creation to what will be the end eventually. And so, but I love to create myths. Honestly, I'm very inspired by sort of like the strange morals. Not strange, but sort of like the tried and true morals that you find in something like the Old Testament, where it's like thing like, for instance, the story of Vespera is essentially the moral is humility, and like the fact that she's the only one. She's not expecting power. She's just thankful for what she has, and she finds joy in what she has. And the Starblood is just a benefactor of that. And so, and so I like to create stories with those morals in them. And then what happens is 1,000 years later, you have Angelica Demonica, and then 3,000 years after that, you have Sword Eye, which is the mainline series I'm starting on now.
Right.
What was I can't bring up the I don't think I can bring up the questions you wrote for me.
I got them. That was part 3. So part 4 is, what do you do to prepare for a new book? Right, you've got all these ideas. Now you're going to prepare. You've told us about your books. Now preparation.
Okay, so I have a very specific thing. I've actually done YouTube videos on it, and also it's available for download on my website. And so I do this thing called the Rule of 5. And what the Rule of 5 is it is the 5 key beats in a story. I do not outline. I suck at outlining. Every time I sit down to outline, my mind goes blank. And so basically, this is my pseudo outline. Now, I was inspired. I think the thing that changed, I have to give a little bit of backstory before to explain this. So the book that was the most influential to me as a writer, the book that was most influential to me, that was not a story as a writer, was Joseph Campbell's The Hero with 1,000 Faces. And the idea that he had. Say what now?
That's the hero's journey.
Yes. It was later. It was the Hero with 1,000 Faces is. I had to read. Yeah. I had to read and reread so much. It's a very dense read, but it was later simplified into the hero's journey. Yes, but anyway, so I took that and I made it into this thing I call the Rule of 5, which is sort of a modification of that. And what it is it's twofold. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Number 1 is, what is the opening scene? So what that means is, where do I put the camera? Whose eyes am I seeing through? Who am I looking at? What does it look like? Where am I putting the camera? Where are we starting? And then the second fold of that one would be, what's the first sentence? Because a lot of the times, if I can think of the first sentence, I think, okay, I have something to go off of. If I think of the first sentence, I can just go from there. Number 2 would be what I call the call to adventure / the driving purpose. Now, these two are intrinsically intertwined, in that the call to adventure is the opportunity that a hero has, or heroine has, to leave their ordinary life and go into the story of the book or of the movie or whatever. Now, the driving purpose is, why are they doing that? It's the motivation. Because if you think about it, the call to adventure is only the invitation. Whereas the driving purpose is, why do they take the invitation? Because they could just as easily not go on the quest.
You have the what, now you're doing the why.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And then number three is interesting because it can happen multiple times. Number three is the twist or the revelation. And this is essentially, well, exactly what it says. It's the part in the book where the reader goes, "What?" like that. That's the
Mm-hmm.
twist or revelation. Number four is the climax or the scene with the most emotional value. This one people debate on me, but I personally hold to it that the climax of the story, the actual turning point, has the highest amount of tension, or should have the highest amount of tension. And so when I think of this, I'm like, what is the point in the climax, that very peak of the summit? That is the most emotional point in the story. And lastly, is the resolution. This is twofold. It's threefold. I'm sorry. The resolution, the cliffhanger, and the final scene. So I like cliffhangers. A lot of people don't, but I do, because I think I'm good at writing them. But I also come. I come from. I come from manga. Manga, it's very much has cliffhangers,
Yeah,
because
every chapter is a fragment. The
yeah, and
For those who don't understand manga, the Japanese, when they talk about the long tail, right? They're not talking about a scroll. They're talking about there's a like they used to have writers who wrote the life story of emperors, and they wrote daily, an entire
right,
book, not just
yeah.
a chapter, entire book. They
Oh
know
yeah.
how to write.
Yes, and another thing, like if you think of it even from a business standpoint, is that, if you're reading 300 chapters, well, you're reading them weekly. So it's their job to make sure that you're going to read the next week.
Yeah,
Yeah, and so they have to think of it that way because, dude, mangaka, they work hard and they work for spitting pennies most of the time. Um,
guys, you
there's
think your
some
minimum wage sucks? Wait till you meet their minimum wage. They are
right.
company property. They
I
live
mean,
on
like if
company property. They earn a. They don't earn a wage. They earn a. What do you call it? What you give kids,
an allowance.
an allowance. Yes, they actually get an allowance. They're not treated as adults. They are treated as company property.
I did not know that. That's wild.
Yeah,
That's
most
funny.
you should read into some of their lives. They even, I mean, some of them, what they do is they make money by selling art on the side. Another one way they make money is they make hentai.
Oh my gosh. I did not
Yeah,
know that. That's
a
actually
lot of.
really
That's
interesting.
why so many drawings are the same.
I
They
knew that
do their
they're
own hentai.
I knew that yeah, like people, like I had a buddy one time, we
Mm,
were at the manga section. I was like, dude, you need to read this one. I was like, I don't, it was, My Hero. Cause
yeah.
he's really into like, like Western comics, like Superman and
Mm.
Batman. I was like, dude, you need to read this one. He was like, oh, I'll just find it online. I was like, dude, don't. He
Oops.
was like, well, he has enough money. I was like, no, he doesn't, man. I was like, he get paid nothing. Like they work, dude. When I work,
They get less. The artists don't qualify in Japan for minimum wage,
wow, I
so
didn't
they
know
have
that.
no protection.
Yeah, well, one of the things that I think one of the things that instilled in me
Yeah,
a very high respect for artists was working on the manga, because
yeah,
what took me, I
yeah.
could write a chapter and edit it in, it's 20-page chapters. I could write and edit a chapter in, I mean, probably 3 hours.
That's
And
way faster than me. I take days. I couldn't. I could make 17,000 words in about a week.
Well, with script writing, it's
It's way
vastly,
less, but
yeah,
yeah,
it's way less, because script writing, the vast majority of writing in script writing is just writing detail for the artist is mainly what you're doing, because Otherwise, all the reader is going to see is the dialogue. So,
Yeah.
as far as like actual, like what they
Yeah.
see from you, you're just writing the conversation. Yeah, what I was going to say, yeah, 4 hours maybe, just to be fair. It
Yeah.
would take me 4 hours, something like that. But it would take her all week to do these chapters. And it's like, these are like long hour days,
Yeah.
writing a 20, it was in seeing that I thought, wow, these artists, they really work, man. Like, they earn it, whatever they do. They like whatever they make or whatever, like they
Yeah.
get money wise, they
And a
earn
lot
it.
of people wonder why they still do it. Well, one, they are pretty secure in their job. If you could draw, you've got a job.
Right.
And two, they're well looked after in respect by this once they have proven themselves. And three, there's always the annual bonus. If the company does well, they've got to pay out a certain percentage every year. So,
Oh, I didn't know that. Huh.
no, I think it's in the contract. It's something that has been recently brought into
Yeah.
In the old days, no,
Oh,
you
wow.
got paid what you got paid. Yeah,
Wow. That's wild.
but in the last couple of years, they have started to bring in more benefits and to try and protect the industry better, not
Yeah.
just protect the artists, the studios, but you've got the writers, the merchandise designers. There's a lot of people. Like a studio, it could be anywhere from 100 to 2,000 people.
Wow.
The
Wow.
manga.
Oh,
It's
wow.
you understand how big the industry is. It's like at one point it was Japan's third largest industry, entertainment. It's still
Wow.
pretty high.
I bet. Yeah. Jeez, man.
And they
Um,
are doing more to protect it now than ever. Because remember, after the war, the Americans came in and took 20% of everything.
oh,
So
wow.
Disney took 20% of Studio Chibi. That's why they say our special relationship, and the Japanese just nod. Yeah, you put your hands in our pocket, war thief, But some of the Japanese studios, because they're modern, they don't have an American partner. That's why
Yeah.
that's why they didn't break out until the 90s. Because in Japan, learning English and was an expensive undertaking.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure.
And
But yeah,
because
no,
of the language and cultural differences, they were very reliant on studios in Montreal because they were cheap, and they did all the international services. But as you know, lately they found out they were having a lot of their rude words and that censored. You'd be surprised how I was surprised how much curso comes up in Japanese.
really?
Yeah,
That's interesting. I did not know that.
yeah, the Japanese have really started to take control of. We're entering a new era of manga. Yeah,
Oh,
if you
wow.
have to
Yeah,
say
yeah.
it.
Oh, well, I was talking to my friend,
It's
my friend
very
in
mature. It's very hard. There's a lot more dystopia. Japanese in the past used to be
yes.
very
I was actually
cheerful and
thinking
upbeat.
the other day, one of the things that I've noticed in I was talking to actually the manga artist for the old manga that I did. We're so good friends, and we were talking about modern manga, and I was saying, one thing that's interesting is that in shonen, which is typically for like, you know, preteen boys,
14 to
I was
17, yeah. Or
I was
12,
like,
yeah.
there's oddly more, like a lot more death than there
Yeah.
was in
It
that
started with
genre.
Ichi the Killer. It started with Ichi the Killer and the original Shin Megami series, which was banned because it was just too violent.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I
But
just noticed that. Yeah, and things are darker now. Um,
but also a lot more hentai is going mainstream.
really?
Well, look at recently with Redo of Healer. Would that have ever been released mainstream in the 90s?
Oh, dude, no.
No.
Um,
Even in the early 2000s, that would have never got released. They even said that they were lucky to get the first season.
When I think of like darker shonen manga now, from what I have read of it, the one I think of is well, there's two. One of them is Chainsaw Man, which is dark, and then the other one is Jujutsu Kaisen, which is dark. Those two in a way are very. I think they're very unique in that vein that they are darker. And they are shonen, like they're shown. They're part of Shonen Jump. I mean,
well, yeah. You look at where manga was in the early 2000s. Bestsellers were One Piece.
You had Fairy Tail,
Fairy Tail, Naruto, To Love Ryu, and Magical Girls. I forget the name. But yeah, the Magical Girl, they were very, very popular.
Yeah,
Magical
I've
Girl,
noticed
something, and you look at it now, and you can actually see some of them going dark. Like you see Bleach after 12th season going darker.
Yeah.
And a lot of people said, oh, that was the downfall. But you look at it, it's now back bigger than ever.
Bleach was kind of always dark, though. Like it had an edge to it. I think that was the thing actually, I'll tell you something about Bleach. Tite Kubo, my favorite manga is One Piece, but as far as manga art goes, Tite Kubo is my favorite artist of all time. Anything he draws, he makes it just look so cool.
Yeah.
Like his art style is so cool. Let me say, so about that rule of 5, I do have a like template copy on my website, williamfburk.com.
I was going to say, if you can send us the link, I'll add it to the description because I
I'll send it to you once we're done. I have a like just a template for it that because it's something that I use it now. So I'm very episodic, probably from my manga background. So a lot of my books are like arc. Like they're like, it's like this arc 1, arc 2, arc 3, and that's a book, but they all tie in, obviously they're all part of a larger umbrella arc, but I typically make it that way. And so a lot of these rules of 5, I'll do it for the whole book, but I'll even do it smaller. That's the thing I love about this, is that, so it goes back to Joseph Campbell's monomyth, in that, the hero's journey is essentially just the human journey. So when I'm looking at an arc, I think, okay, what's the opening scene to this arc? What's the call to adventure here? So it's macro and micro. And that's why I like that rule of 5 thing so much, is because you can really do it on a small scale as well.
I just can't think of it at the moment. But there was it Berserk? Where you have the story in the story?
I don't know.
I know they did. I know a lot of Japanese, they do it in single arcs, but there's some, I'm not sure if it was Berserk. I think Berserk, where you, and Fairy Tail, you've got the 5 different stories there.
Right.
I think it is called story to story. You do not see it often in manga, but when you do, it really stands out, and it's done well because it does lend itself to long form storytelling.
Right.
Where you don't have arc 1, arc 2, arc 3, etc. What you have is, you may have arc 1 here, but arc 2 has already started, and arc 3.
Yeah, they're concurrent.
Yeah. So you have 3, like you have chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but as you're reading it, it's going backwards and forwards. Like
yeah. I know what you're talking about. Yeah. Um, I'm trying to remember
There's a little bit of that in One Piece if you went in the later.
Yeah. Well, One Piece is always, yeah, especially later,
An
but you
evolving
can kind of
story.
see,
It's an evolving style.
yeah, exactly. Well, it is almost 30 years old. So you do see from the beginning to the end, you see Oda slowly solidifying his style and his storytelling techniques. Like the East Blue saga, the East Blue arc, the first, I think it's like the first 50 episodes or something like that, are vastly different from, like, say, Dressrosa, which is like the fourth from the end of what we have now, or even Wano, which was the one of the previous arcs. And so you just see over time that from here he's solidifying that's another thing that's very interesting about One Piece is it's not only a great story, uh, that spans over a long period of time. You can actually see the evolution of a storyteller in it. If you
Yeah.
can even see the evolution of his art. Like if you look
Yeah.
at his art in the manga today versus his art when he first began,
Well,
that
I
that's
would
true.
say in his first, I would say this shows you when you do your first one, you have the establishment of a style, but you also have
Yes,
the freedom of time and revision.
that's what I was telling my friend when she was talking about the second book. Is like when you're doing the second one, you
You
already
are
have some
confined.
stipulations from the first one
Yes,
because it
once you
has to
have
make
finished,
sense.
yes, you can only go forward and you can only expand. You cannot
Yes,
revise.
exactly. Yeah, you can't take anything. That's the thing about a series is anything you say in the first book is law in the second book.
Yeah,
Unless you can find
a
like some
loophole
way,
or
unless there's
unreliable narrator. Yeah,
yeah. Or no, not even that, but like if you say something in this book and then it changes between this book and the next book, you could change it, but it has to be a twist. It can't just be a retcon. It has to be a twist. It has to seem natural.
yeah.
And that's a very loose thing because not everything can be changed, obviously. But there are some slight gray areas there where things can be changed here and
So
there.
you take One Piece with the evolution of Nami.
Yeah.
That is a gradual and twisted evolution, which is natural. I mean, all three characters are originally out to get each other and out to betray each other. And Luffy starts off as a naive, you know,
Yes. Yeah.
that I could
Luffy
just
is.
fix them. Hey, I can live without them.
Yeah. Yeah. Luffy. Yeah. Luffy is a very interesting character, honestly. In
And the
that.
thing is, a lot of people don't know this, but the monkey man is a stereotype in Japanese culture of the fool.
Oh, I did not know that. The Fool, as in like the tarot cards.
Yeah. They have a few overlap. Well, tarot tarot was evolved from Eastern esotericism
Okay.
through Persia. So
I did not know that. That's interesting.
yeah, there's a lot of Buddhist influence in there that people haven't picked up on, but there's a lot of differences. Okay, too. You can't take it as one for one, but in Japan they do have archetypes, and the fool is one of the few, the monkey man, who overlap in the West and the East.
Huh. Interesting. Um.
Well,
Yeah.
you look at the story of Monkey; it's one of the oldest and most well known. That's what Luffy is. He is Monkey.
Okay.
It's
And
it's
it even
a
makes
fool.
sense.
Yeah,
Yeah, it
it
even
makes
makes
sense
sense that
now.
that's his name. Okay,
Yeah,
that's cool. Um.
a lot of people don't pick up on it, but you look at the original drawings for Luffy.
Oh yeah. There's actually there's a manga out right now called Wanted. It's like the initial short story that started One Piece.
Yeah,
I really want to read it. But
yeah.
it's like
Its
it's like
cover is
pre One
Luffy.
Piece.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But yeah, no, that's how I typically go about setting up a story is that rule of five.
Yeah, and then basically now comes the inspiration, right?
The
What is the
now
inspiration to write?
my inspiration to write
The
this
book.
book,
Yeah.
or in general,
No, the book. Yeah.
the book.
'Cause you've had the
Well,
idea now. Yeah, that's what's the inspiration to write it?
so it was interesting because I thought of this story, Sword Eye, when I was, as Angelica Demonica, the manga version, was slowly dying down. I
Yeah.
had in my mind. So Angelica Demonica, the reason I made a manga first was because the idea of a novel scared me. It seemed like a lot of work, and it scared me. But the after the manga was done, I felt like I had enough experience, and I was like, well, maybe I could try it. And so the story underwent several. So it underwent several different uh, stages. The first one was it had Eldrick in it, and it had Blake in it, and they were the main characters. And then so it didn't work out. I don't know why. Like it was just every time I do know why, but every time I tried to write this story, it just didn't work. And I was like, what am I missing? And then it came to me just one day as I was driving home. I heard these, in my mind, I was just like, what is it? Because these two characters themselves, Eldrick and Blake, they weren't strong enough to hold a story. And I was thinking these two are obviously side characters. They themselves are not strong enough to carry a story. And so one of the final creations of this story, probably the second to last part of this story, was the creation of the two main characters, Lucas and Knox. So once I had them, I had, two characters that were very young and impressionable that I thought could carry a story. I thought, well, there's a lot they start here, they have a lot to learn. And that's always good. That's always good with a story when your main character has a lot to learn. But what happened was I was very inspired by Kingdom Hearts, actually. Kingdom Hearts is always been a love of mine because I remember playing it back on the PS2 a long time ago. But anyway, I felt this sort of like connection between the two, and I felt like, okay, these two characters kind of have that feel about them, kind of like almost like Lucas and Knox kind of have this connection, almost like Sora and Riku, in that they're best friends, and they're basically each other's ride or die in a way. So the inspiration came from that. I am very much inspired by Kingdom Hearts, the Tales series, Tales of series, and Final Fantasy. Those Final Fantasy is huge in my world building, which is it ends up being some sort of like weird steampunkish kind of thing.
It does. Final Fantasy is like, I guess the original concept was it's the final stage of ever. Like in Japanese writing, they look at their writing styles as reaching that video games was the peak of evolution of writing. So that would be the final stage of evolution for fantasy.
I actually believe, and don't quote me on it, but I heard this, that the reason they called it Final Fantasy was because at the point the company was going under, and that was the game.
Yeah. But what I
Yeah.
mean is that they had, when they initially planned it, right, it was an evolving story, and that that this was the evolution of, but they'd spent so long on it, it was like, yeah. So, because like because I think when most people got Final Fantasy, it was in its. That's why I think it had numbers. Is because it was not the actual releases, but the actual versions.
Oh wow, yeah. My
And you're
biggest,
right.
the biggest.
You can't quote me on it, but I think they had multiple things going on at the same time, and you had different people all coming to the same conclusion that this is the Final Fantasy.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
I think my biggest
they
influence.
never intended to make anything after, and that's when you got 7, right? You had the PS2 Final Fantasy, and then you had just bang Final Fantasy 7. I mean, you
Yeah,
try and
and they
find the
kept
rest of the
going.
stories, and they were released, here and there, bits and pieces. Like you got
Yeah,
PlayStation, you've got the Nintendo one, but yeah, but they never intended to become this big, massive company. Like it's a company within a company.
right, right. Oh yeah. Well, Final Fantasy is probably.
They always have no, but what I mean is the Final Fantasy division of Square Enix. That's it. That's all they do.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's cool.
Yeah,
Wow.
that's why it's always so. Um, and people don't get it. Like Final Fantasy, is not the Final Fantasy 7. What's it called again? Rebirth.
Yeah, Rebirth. Yeah,
It's not a reboot. It's
it's a
not a
remake.
remake.
Yeah.
It is a sequel of the alternative timeline. See, Final Fantasy is branched into multiple timelines.
Right, right, right.
And now, if you don't know anything about Japanese writing, I'm talking to the audience here. Uh, Evangelion, sorry. The first wave, second wave, and then the 3 third waves do not occur simultaneously or in alternative universes or are different stories. All of them are a linear story that has occurred where each chapter, right, in the third wave, Senji starts at the train station. Third wave B, Senji starts at the train station. Third wave C, he's in the Nexus,
Oh
and he
wow.
gets to choose.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
they are linear stories. Final Fantasy is the same thing. They may occur at different times in different places, but they are one universe in a linear fashion. So 7 has occurred, 7 Rebirth is exactly that. All the characters starting again, just like in Evangelion. They get to start again.
I think my biggest inspiration, world building wise, was probably Final Fantasy 12.
Yeah,
I
which
feel
is
like that
actually
one.
a sequel to 7, isn't it? And then 10
No,
is a different,
12 is a sequel to. I want to
because they're not
say.
linear in the sequel numbers. The stories are written at different times, so that
Well,
if it's
12
just in release
was.
order. Yeah,
I can't remember exactly which one it's a sequel to, but I think it's Vagrant Story. I think
yeah,
Vagrant Story is, and then
yeah,
Final Fantasy 12 has
yeah.
a sequel
But
called
that's what
Revenant
they've done,
Wings.
because they've actually have in, I think it's in 14, they have a character from 7 and from 9.
14,
See,
yes.
because in Final Fantasy they use various esoteric, such as reincarnation, rebirth, is not the same.
Right.
In reincarnation, you start again with a new life. In rebirth, it's you, but you don't
Gotcha,
have.
gotcha.
So you're born as, so like you have the same looks, you have the same name, but you may not have the same parents. You may not be on the same planet. You may not even be in the same time period. or in sequence, but you are in sequence to your own story.
Right. Right.
But you don't have but your past life connections don't always occur, right? Now, there's a
Right.
third, I forget what it's called, and that is where you're both reincarnated and reborn. And that is, with reincarnations, you have connections to your past life. With rebirths, it's like, hey, I'm going to clean slate. But
Right.
you mix
Right.
the two, and and that's what you get with some of the characters in Final Fantasy. That's why people lose their shit, because they don't go through, because the Japanese assume you'll learn the context.
Right. 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 What?
And put up your hand if you think Westerners are lazy shits who never learn Japanese context.
I'm trying to remember. So it
Which is
was.
why Western attempts at manga often fail, because the Japanese, you're not Japanese enough, and the Western audience is, expects too much of expects more. You know what I mean? They have
Oh,
low
right. Yeah. Yeah.
expectations.
100%.
Whereas you got to be so much better.
Yeah. Yeah. What was the next question? I'm trying to remember.
Oh, right. Sorry. You brought it up before, what you're currently working on. Book 3, isn't it?
Yes, book 3, The Eye of Revelation.
Yeah.
And in this book, no, I can't say too much, but in this book, we're going to learn, the Eye of Revelation. If you've read the first 2 books, you know what that is. And so, but also going on that, this book is very much a book of revelations, where the idea of what the end of the world is doing is slowly going to start becoming tangible, and in our minds, like, oh, this is what the end of the world is doing.
Yeah. I forget where it's from, the character Zero, but you understand that there are a couple of different characters in Japanese mythology. Zero.
I did not know that.
Well, heroes and villains seem to be very tied to. Well, you got demons, different demons, or yokai. Sorry, but within the yokai, you have demons are Pacific, and you have, of course, the Pacific endings. Like, you might have a demon who only wants to end, a Pacific town or a Pacific city. They all have different. Yeah, you have 126 end of the worlders.
Right. Yeah, the end of the world is. Yeah, I don't know. I like that name.
But yeah, but you have in Japanese yokai that, because in my story, that's what I'm dealing with right now, and there are just so many different yokai, and even if you go into, hi, let's look up the foxtails. Oh shit.
Right. Yeah. No, the for me, it was weird
It's
for
an
me
interesting name,
because.
though. I
Do what?
agree to that. It is an interesting name because it is so open.
Yeah. For me, the thing was, especially writing a series, you are going to evolve as well. And as you write, I always tell people that you can outline into oblivion, but your story is going to change the most as you write it.
See, I started writing on the as a military sci-fi. So
Yeah.
for me, the first casualty of war is the first casualty of war is the plan.
Right.
And that stuck with me because I ended up not writing a military sci-fi from the beginning. Rather, I'm writing the prequels.
Right. The for me, I it's one of those strange things where I did something unintentionally. If I look at the first chapter of Heart of Hearts, and then now at book 3, the first chapter of Heart of Hearts was sort of written as a hook, and
Yeah.
it went with the rest of the story, but outside of just being interesting, it didn't have anything else. And then as I'm writing book 3, I was like, oh heck, like, yo, this is why I wrote. I didn't even know. I was like, it all ties in. And so we're going to
We
see
often
how
do
that
that to
ties in book
ourselves.
3.
We have a story and we'll write the prequel to it, but so often we forget to actually publish it because, see, in Japan, like a lot of people, and you do come across it, is you'll have a short story in Shonen, right?
Right.
And a Shonen Jump, or in what's the other one? I forget its name.
It's not anyway.
It's often it's actually republished in web novel. I think it's Zen.
Why?
Zen has a web novel site, and you often find them there.
Okay.
And under shorts. If you're really into certain manga, you'll start to pick up on certain names and events, and you go, I didn't read about this. And then you'll go back and you'll find other works in the back of the which is actually at the front, because when you open a manga, you got the writer, the other works, and then it goes in a Z, right? But you realize, wait a minute, he's actually given it the context that we're looking for is in all his shorts published elsewhere.
Right. Yeah, it was just a strange little thing where there's actually a certain line, which it won't be a spoiler if I give it to you, but the certain line in book 1 is, do you hear that distant breeze, that faint elegy? And that line became...
I did something like that myself. I have
it was like, do you hear it?
Coming darkness. Yeah. Do you see the coming darkness? Yeah.
When I wrote it, it meant one thing, but now that I'm on book 3, I know exactly what it meant. When the end of the world, do you hear that distant breeze, that faint elegy?
Mm-hmm.
As I'm writing book 3, I'm like, oh wow, like it has so much more depth than what I initially planned it to have.
Have you seen the anime A Distant Voice?
I know of it. I have not seen it. I know of it.
Peel the layers back and then watch Amnesia.
Okay.
And you'll get it if you get it right.
Right.
And you'll go, one watch the other. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I get what you're saying.
And people will go, wait a minute, Distant Voice is about a guy talking to his girlfriend from a distance, and Amnesia is about humanity having its memory wiped out. Well, once you work out that, wait a minute, they both watched the same manga and they both read each other at some point.
Yeah.
And you'll actually understand, and when you do that, and when you brought up that, do you hear that distant voice? That's what I'm talking about, that foreshadowing on such a grand scale. And that's something that a lot of people don't get in the West, because I think most Westerners are used to the one novel story.
Yes. Yeah,
but anybody under 35 is used to manga.
Yeah.
Because of the death of the Western comic book. I mean, let's put it this way. For every Batman sold, there's 7.5 Naruto sold. It's not, it's like, and that is like almost a multiplier across the whole industry.
Well,
but for every Western comic, its Japanese equivalent is 7 to 10 times in sales.
Yes, in a way they are the modern they're the modern epic.
So if you think Marvel's worth $5 billion, then Naruto's worth 50, 75.
Oh, wow.
Easy.
Right.
And then you look at something like Sailor Moon and you go, holy crap. It sold over 100 million. You're like, Sailor V, the re-release, sold 100 million copies. It's like, what?
Yeah.
J.K. Rowling would be, if it was just one person, they would have J.K. Rowling money and then Lucas money, you know,
Yes, 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 yes,
and it's
100%.
not. It's a
It's
big team.
it's
That's why the average
I
manga, some of them like 1,600 people worked
yeah.
on. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, they're the like I said, they are the modern epic poem. That's what they
yeah,
are.
yeah.
Uh,
And you go back to the birth of the epic, and you have the birth of the epic in uh, uh, Black Wu Huang, the story of Monkey. You know,
yeah,
the Journey to the West, I think it was originally called. You have Genshin, which I don't think would ever be published in its full form in the West because it involves rape, incest, you know, the whole lot. He seduces his cousin and impregnates her, you know, and then he rounds up 106 women to be his warriors at the end, you know, to it's a one and done. He seduces these women, and in the end, they are waiting on the hill for the end, you know.
right, right.
And you're talking about here that coming. Well, Japan has been writing year zero stories for 1,000+
Right, right,
years.
right. But yeah, that was uh um what was uh what was the initial question for that? I'm trying to remember.
Oh,
What was my
sorry. You're currently working on. You talked about
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
how you're
yeah. That's
doing
what I was currently working
how
on.
the
Yeah,
blend.
that's what I'm working on right now. I want to get back to the light novel. So the light novel, I mean, yeah, the light novel. I want to get back to it eventually. It's on Tapas.io. It's sort of stopped right now just because I don't really have time for it.
Yeah.
But it takes place 3,000 years before. So it takes place 3,000 years before Sword Eye. It tells it tells the story of why things are the way they are in Sword Eye. Like in Angelica Demonica, there are angels, while in Sword Eye there are no more angels. The angels are gone, and we don't really know why. And so we're gonna learn. You get hints. You get hints of why the angels are gone. So my stories are not. They tell so like the different series. So far, the series I have planned are Angelica Demonica, Sword Eye, and then after that there is what was it called? Trying to remember now. Well, I can't remember that one. And then there's one called Transcend Devil. Um, and they're gonna tell a bunch of stuff. And at the end, I think the last series is going to be called Trillion Voyage. Um, anyway, yeah, I'm writing Angelica Demonica as well, and it's sort of like one that um, is a prequel. It'll tell why the rest of the world is set up the way it is. Uh, yeah. Anyway,
That's great.
yeah. So that's. I'm trying to remember what. I really wish I could pull up the questions because then I could help
8.
you out.
What advice would you give to a new writer?
Oh yeah, I like this one. Um, okay, so I have harsh words, and that is as a new writer, you're going to hear a lot of stuff. You're going to hear you. I'll give you an example. So when I first decided I wanted to write a novel, back when I was like 18 years old, it didn't happen until I was 22. But when I first started wanting to write a novel, I wanted to know how, because, one of the things I got the most when I published Heart of Hearts were people would come to me and be like, I want to write a novel, but I just don't know how. And I found that was something that's a legitimate, you know, thing that people have. And from my own experience, when I would go, I wanted to know how. I went to the library, I picked up books like How to Write a Short Story. There was one that was like it was Publishers Weekly, and it was like top 5 things not to do in your novel. And there's all sorts of stuff like that, and I'm going to tell you right now, they're all bullshit. Every last one of them are bullshit. And my advice to anyone who wants to write is, in order to write, you only need two things. You have to do two things if you want to write, and that is it. The first one, of course, is write a lot. If you write a lot, you're going to be good. The second thing, read a lot. Just read everything. Read a lot. Those two things, because writing is practice, reading is study. And if you have study and practice, you're going to end up okay. I think the thing about writing advice, these like writing advice, like things not to do in your novel, and, 5 character trends that are, 5 character trends that you need to stop doing. The thing with that is that all it does, I'm not saying that those things are inherently bad. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is that those things are usually confusing, because someone who wants to write a story, they sit down and they think, oh, okay, I have to do this, and this. When writing in a way is, you can't think of it as a list of this. You have to think of it as in, am I telling a good story? Because you can do something that is overdone and do it right, and it be fine.
Here's the thing. A lot of the writing books, particularly the art of writing, they will tell you how to write. Like Stephen King will tell you how to write a Stephen King novel.
Yes.
Patterson, who used to go from giving no interviews to now being like every week on advertising masterclass, and his masterclass at $2,000 odd dollars,
right?
Which is a complete and utter ripoff. But then again, how else do you make $129 million a year?
Yeah.
You don't make it from writing books.
Well, I think the thing is that when you read a lot as a writer, you pick up the things that you like, and it helps mold your style. Because like one of the examples was, I was reading Age of Myth by what's his name? I just lost it. Anyway, I was reading his book. It's not Sullivan, Michael J. Sullivan. Anyway, he did this thing.
You just got it because I called it up. Yeah.
Yeah. He does this thing in that book that I found interesting, where he will make a character talk in quotations, and then underneath it put the character's thought in italics. And I thought that was interesting. And as I'm reading, I was like, oh, I see what he's doing here, and I want to use that too. And that is how you learn as a writer. It's not from some checklist of do this, don't do this, do this.
Yeah.
It's rather, you have to find your own voice, and you do that by reading other people. Because when you do that, not only does it give you learn storytelling techniques. That's what it is. Yeah. You're learning how to tell a story from reading someone tell a story. You can read all these do's and don'ts and do it. You can do everything just like the lists say, everything just like all the advice says, and it still come out looking like crap.
Yeah, I don't know if it was Frank Herbert's son or his editor in an interview was saying, when Frank was writing, he kept getting told to stop writing down the character's thoughts. So he doubled down.
Yes, 100%. Because that's the thing.
Because I have in the West, that's what he kept saying. People won't get the story if they don't know the context.
Yes, I actually have. So I have a very specific motto that I like to tell other writers, and that is, because we all learn writing do's and don'ts, and I think for the most part, I think most of them are misleading. And so my whole motto is, all things are permissible when appropriate. You know, like the instance, the big example of that I can give is the show don't tell. And I think that's inherently misleading, because I think the The question
The
should
vast
be,
majority, sorry to interrupt here, but the vast majority keep getting told show, don't tell. But here's the problem. Exposition is the only way to world build.
yes, and well, that's what I was going to say. I was saying that the idea is not show don't tell. The idea is knowing when to show and knowing when to tell. That's the mark. That's one of the marks of mastery. Is okay. I need to show this. I need to tell this because you are telling a story, and like you said, there is exposition. So yeah, it's just knowing the two.
Growing up, the biggest thing I hated is the cutaway, because two people would stand and plot, and then they'd cut away. Right?
Right.
Here's what we're going to do. Cut away, and then they show doing it. But the thing is that to me is bullshit, because there's no way you can coordinate in a couple of minutes that huge complex scene.
Yes, okay. I'm glad you brought that up. So there is something that I would talk about from time to time in storytelling, and it's just it's a little trick that it's not like it's unique to me, but it's a trick that I learned when I was writing The Heart of Hearts, and that was when I have that cutaway, like you said, it can't be quick, because when you're writing, you have this sort of subconscious unseen timeline, and the reader is going by that timeline. So like one of the things I think to remedy that would be have your cutaway, then we're going to switch to some other characters doing some other things, like we're going to go, okay, well, let's go over here to this character group and let them do some things first, and then we're going to come back to that cutaway. Well, what I've done is I've created the illusion of time in between those two, because something happened in between. It doesn't feel rushed or like it's a snap. Instead, what has happened is time has passed. It feels that way, that time has passed. Okay, well, now enough time. Let's go back and see what they're doing.
Yeah, but I actually have exposition where people do planning and discussing things, and you might say, oh, but they should know that. But when but have you ever been around a group of old men or even been around politics? You quickly learn repetition is the planning.
Right.
Repeating things over and over again, that's the planning, or the reinforcement of ideas.
Right.
In real life,
yeah.
Real life, though, planning and conversations are the vast majority of situations.
Yes.
And if you don't have real planning, how do you know your character's a genius if you're constantly cutting away?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. I think, yeah, the idea there of time. Yeah, you definitely have to have stuff like that. But yeah, that's my advice to new writers. Just read a lot, write a lot. You have to do those two things. You're going to end up okay.
Number 3, don't expect to be a millionaire.
Yeah. Add that one there too. Don't expect to be a millionaire. And
sorry, I have an allergy.
No, you're fine. And I think the biggest thing is expect discouragement. It's going to happen, but keep doing it.
Actually, here's another thing. You're going to meet a lot of people who are going to try and put their hands in your pockets.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Yeah. Actually, it's kind of funny.
Marketers, editors.
I have so many people. I mean, just it's probably like maybe 50 a month of just people on Facebook, Instagram, not commenting, like messaging me like, hey, I saw your book and it looks so nice. And I'm just like, look, if you're selling me anything, just move on. Like, I don't need to buy your reader package. I just want
to connect with other writers.
How's
the sales going? I just happen to have a marketing team.
Because it always ends up to that.
Believe it or not, the vast majority of writers are editors, journalists.
Yes.
A lot of them work in marketing companies or whatever. A lot of them, the reason why some of them are so prolific is because they're ghostwriting or whatever. They're just taking whatever story is unpublished, sitting on the shelves, and giving them new characters and breathing new life into old stories. There are so many writing scams out there. You'll hear this.
Oh, dude, it's so bad. Yeah, no,
You
I'll
hear
just
this
be like,
one. It's called the Writing Queen. You ever heard of the Writing Queen scam?
no, I haven't.
A prolific author or a prolific female author will come on to you and tell you she's a writing queen, and she'll tell you the secret of writing lots of novels, etc., etc. And and eventually, they're just all reaching in the pocket.
Right,
Basically.
right.
But yeah, the basically you get a bunch of ghostwriters together, and you basically AI novels for pennies, and sell them for.
Yeah, yeah. Oh,
But
it's so bad. Like,
yeah,
I get to the point where I'm just like, I just call them out on it. I'm like, look, man, I'm like, just move on. One person was
yeah,
like one person like kept trying to like, and I go, dude, I was like, look, man, I've gotten 5 other dudes just like you in the past 5 days. Like, move on, dude. Just move on. But I just don't have time for it anymore. I'm
I've had
spiteful.
people SEO, marketing, editors. I admit, right, in my earlier naive days, I had people telling me what a great author I was, as
Yeah.
and I keep telling myself, if I'm such a great author, why aren't I selling more? And then, of course, obviously, they come around and say because you don't market or you're not putting enough bids in, because with Amazon ads, you've got a bid per
Yeah.
ad.
Yeah, you do.
But or Facebook or CP, clicks per, cost per clicks, and all these things. But eventually, what it comes down to, and I hate to tell people this because most people don't believe it, it's your story. If people like your story, not the story you wrote, they like your story. And the
Okay, I
vast
see what you're
majority
saying.
of people don't like to elevate someone else. So they really have to think that you're like, there's a reason why J.K. Rowling lied about her past. Because if she told everybody she was just a rich bitch tossed out for cheating on her husband, how far do you think she'd get?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've noticed that a lot, especially in the writing community, where people,
Everybody's lying about their backstory.
yeah.
All these
Well, yeah,
successful
because
writers.
here's the
George
thing.
Martin, he's not some nobody hit from Hicksville. He's 20 years as a Hollywood writer, you know?
Well, what's funny about that is, I guess the funny thing, the the thing to say would be, you know, if everybody told their backstory, most of them would be boring.
Yeah.
If everybody
I,
told the true one.
yeah. I
Um,
mean, yeah, George Martin went around telling everybody he was a Hollywood writer, and Game of Thrones took him 20 years to write, and that's why everything is taking so long because like he's just scrambling.
right, right. He did
But,
really good work
but
on Elden Ring.
yeah, he's worked on so much. He's made it. If he told everybody the truth, hey, I made $15 million this year because I wrote 50 scripts. Yeah, people are kind of not going to. Yeah, because I unfortunately, because I've had so many odd jobs. One of them was I had the displeasure of having to rip covers off books. That's why I know when about book returns.
Oh,
And the
okay.
covers we ripped off and put into recycling, we had 6 warehouses of Harry Potter books.
Oh, wow. I did not know that.
There are,
Whoa, man.
but the thing is, they told us, what would you say if I told the foreman said, what would I say if I told you that every book here is a sale?
Oh my gosh. That's
When
a lot.
borders collapsed because they had bought so many Harry Potter books, because they would never return to the author, they counted as a sale.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, yeah, I can see that. I can see that. Um,
So
yeah.
whenever somebody says, "Oh, she was there for 4 years," and then suddenly, no, she just happened to have her books pushed onto Borders because they were desperate to beat Amazon, and instead of lowering their prices and doing online deliveries, and they hired some cheap ass idiot from Portland University who didn't know HTML from JavaScript to do their website. And then they had some PC server somewhere, they had a litany of errors that just basically created a perfect storm where basically a lot of authors who basically had their publishers dump all these books on the Borders, and bang, they went bust.
Right.
And so it wasn't just her, it was a lot of books from a lot of authors. And because you look at it since, everything's gone down, since Borders.
Yeah.
There are so many 99-cent books out there, and there are so many, there are more books published this year than last year. And in the last 10 years, there are more books published than in the last 100 years. And in the last 100 years, there were more books published than in the last 1,000 years.
Right. Oh, yeah, 100%. What was, I'm trying to,
sorry.
Oh, yeah, the question was about advice for new writers.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be it.
And we're talking about why you shouldn't, just think about it. When J.K. Rowling might have had, 100 to 1,000 writers to compete against.
Right.
Now you have 10,000 a month to compete against.
Oh my gosh, a month. That's crazy. Yeah.
And don't forget, a lot of them seeing on YouTube, the Writing Queen. I'll call up the Writing Queen and I too will write 14 books that will make $1 million a year. Well, if she makes $1 million a year off 14 books, why would she sell them to you?
Right.
That's why there are so many books out there. There are so many I remember when cookbooks were a thing. Remember when all the cookbooks were a thing in the early 2000s?
Yeah.
Every chef had a cookbook,
Right. What was the next one?
How do you deal with stress?
Oh, I don't. Kidding.
Yeah. Like 50-50. I found this, half the people who write are stressed and the other half aren't stressed, except when they're
I'm stressed
writing.
100%. I just meant I don't deal with it.
Oh, right.
Yeah, no. That's a difficult question. Typically I try to rest, and a lot of the times, just
it's your motivator.
I really am not good at it. I honestly don't even know if I know an answer to that, to be honest with you.
See, yeah, it is. Because I'm such a high-strung person, I've actually been through stress and stress mechanisms and coping mechanisms and things like these,
right.
Stress rings, got many names. I can't think of them all right now. Okay. Stress is your fight or flight motivator.
Yes, it is.
It is telling you when you're in danger, but unfortunately what happens is it has what's called a memory.
Gotcha.
And people call this memory post-traumatic stress syndrome, but that is not exactly true, because your stress indicators as you go through start burning pathways in your brain, so that the next time you're stressed, you reach them and you'll automatically deal with stress.
Right.
So people who don't deal stress are doing it automatically. People like me are dealing with stress because they don't have an automatic cutoff.
Yeah, I'm kind of that way. I really like, my wife is good at sort of when I get, because I typically overthink and I get in my head about stuff, and so my wife is pretty good about stop it, stop it. Like, slap me on the wrist. Stop it. Stop it. She'll put me back where I need to be. I'm thankful. Yeah. I'm very thankful for that. Very lucky. But yeah, no, to end on that, yeah, no, I don't have, I mean, I'll play video games or something like that, but I think complacency is bad. I think that once you become, I don't think you should ever be comfortable. I think once you become comfortable in your writing, I think that's when you start growing. When you stop growing, and so I think it's good in a way to, I think it's good in a way to be not comfortable, even if it is a little stressful in writing, because I think it's a sign. It's a sign that you don't know everything, and when you think you know everything, that's when you realize that you start to go downhill.
Yeah. I think I'm not going to point out any one writer, but you look at the fall from grace of recently some writers, and you definitely look at them, and their last 10 novels were the same,
Yeah, 100%.
Or you get a writer who's prolific, and because of the lack of competition, they're famous for being famous. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's true. They become sort of a caricature.
You can't do that anymore because there are so many prolific writers out there now. In the past, prolific writers were rare. Now they're in the past, you'd get a Salinger who would write a novel, and it'd be like their entire effort went into that one novel, and they're burnt out from it. Whereas now, somebody like Philip K. Dick would be the norm, not the exception.
Right.
Where I wrote this fantastic novel about androids, and the publisher said, "Nah, I'll throw it in the pile. Maybe I'll publish it next year." And he goes away and writes another 5 books in the meantime.
Right. Oh yeah. There's some people. Yeah, 100%. There are a lot of them now that have become, because back in the day it was only a few, but now a lot of them have become household names.
Yeah, but Philip K. Dick wasn't a success in his lifetime. That's what people don't understand. You may not have your audience yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true.
I mean, I remember, I'm not going to name names, but one of the reasons why I wrote is because of the preponderance of mediocrity that was in the top of that was on the top of the bookshelf every time I went to the bookstore, and it was the same authors, whether it was year in year. Have you ever noticed that?
Go in there and it's just the same thing. That's why a lot of people have turned to indie books, is because they know they can get variety out of it.
That's why the bookstores died.
Yeah, that's 100%. Yeah, it's kind of sad to see them die, but I mean, they dug their own grave.
Yeah, they didn't die. Yeah, they not only dug their own grave, they Borders put themselves in it. Like every shortcut that every business school tells you not to take, they took.
Yeah.
Never buy more inventory than your current sales. They bought an entire year's worth of books.
Right.
They broke every rule. It's like you look at Disney today and you go, are they deliberately sabotaging yourself? And then you go back and look at Borders and say, did they deliberately sabotage?
Yeah, I mean, you can say the same thing about GameStop.
Bethesda.
Yeah.
And right now we're looking at Steam and going, you know what? I reckon in 10 years' time there'll be GOG, Epic, but Steam will be gone.
Yeah, and another one, believe it or not, Square Enix is like that now too. Square Enix is
I think they'll hit Final Fantasy 20, and then they'll go, you know what? We're bankrupt.
Yeah. 100%.
Because remember, a lot of their staff are the same from the 90s, and they're not going to be around much longer.
Yeah, a lot of
Japanese game studios, they have this model, and they always seem to be like they have the same 100 people work on the same 100 games, and it's like, and then out of all that work, maybe one will get published.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
And
like it's
it's a lot of
incredibly
money.
wasteful.
I
And
mean, like we're
Square
looking
Enix,
at, I was going to
Square
say,
Enix
I
isn't
mean,
the only
some of
one.
the
You look at
games
Sony as well.
we're looking at some games like the AAA games like Final Fantasy. Like you're looking at budgets that are like Hollywood movies.
No, worse.
Oh
Worse.
yeah.
You have some that are, yeah, you have some that are $100 million just for the art. You look at BioWare. You look at
Yeah.
how much they put into Dragon Vale. That was multiple movie budgets, 20-something million dollars a year for 12 years.
God, jeez,
You
man.
look at Blizzard, their development budget, 1.2 billion. You look at Sony, they poured how much into Concord?
That's wild.
250.
That is wild.
But you got to
Um,
remember, a game makes 10 times the movie industry.
yeah, I believe it. I believe that.
The top 100 companies could buy Disney.
That's crazy. They could buy Disney.
Look at Microsoft. Look how big Microsoft is.
Oh yeah,
Look how,
yeah, yeah. Microsoft for sure. Yeah.
yeah, I'm talking about the top 100 companies in
Right,
the
right,
tech
right.
industry, because none of them, because the game studios are owned by tech companies.
Okay. I guess that makes sense. Yeah, consider they are. Yeah, that's crazy that it's like that. I didn't know that games were that like the AAA. I didn't realize how much money it
Triple
actually
A
went into them.
studios, there's like 100 and something of them, and by next year there'll be a few gone. They
Wow.
reckon within 10 years, half of them are gone. Ubisoft, Square Enix. Although, remember, Square Enix started as Square and Enix.
And then
They
became
merged.
it started,
And
wasn't it Squaresoft at some point?
yeah, they changed Squaresoft and Enix something. They
Right,
merged.
right.
They look at Blizzard Entertainment or EA. Look at them all. They started as small operations that grew very fast because they did what a lot of publishers do. They grabbed as many diverse products as they can and surround themselves. But eventually, over time, they pushed the little guys out. But what they
Right,
didn't
right.
understand is we don't always eat out at the restaurant.
What do you mean by
Right? We
that?
may only buy $70. The majority of us buy one game a year,
Right.
but they're expecting us to buy 100 games a year. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
nah. That's crazy. That's crazy to think about.
They forget that what they forget. All markets have saturation. I
Yes.
did business. All markets have saturation, and the video game industry went from down to oversaturated in 24 years, right? Early
Right.
2000s game companies were small, right? Where you had Disney and Sony and very big tech companies, and like, you know, Disney, look at Square Enix. They shot past Disney, and originally they were on
Right.
Disney's doorstep begging to develop Kingdom Hearts. Now
Yeah, that was
now
true.
they're way well, look how far ahead they are of Disney
Yeah.
in the entertainment space. But the problem is when you publish 100 games a year or whatever it is, and then you look at Steam where it's gone from 100, 200, 300 to something like 86,000 games.
Yeah.
There is saturation. There are people who are saying, I can't play Final Fantasy 12. I'm still on 7.
Right, right.
Or
Yeah.
I gave up after 10. There's Nintendo, where I'm not going to buy Nintendo Gold again. I played the game. I'll just download the ROM because
Yes.
I'm not
Yeah,
going to
that's a
buy
big thing.
Pokemon again and again and again. I want the one I had the Pokemon game. Why should I buy another one?
Right.
because when you buy a new Twitch, you have or a new Switch or a new whatever it's going to be, like when you buy a new Game Boy, the cartridges didn't plug back in. You know what I mean?
Yeah. There's no back compatibility. Yeah, that's how they get
So,
you.
and people have finally given up. They started throwing. Remember in the 2000s when people were throwing away their Game Boys because they went Game Boy Color, and that's it. You know, they got duped, and they weren't going to buy the next one.
Right. Yeah, because that's how they get you on that stuff.
But then they brought
Um,
out. But Nintendo nearly died until they brought out GoldenEye.
yeah, rare.
Rare,
Yeah,
rare reboot.
I don't know. They were the Wii U sold good in Japan, but I don't think it did well
Not
universally.
okay. The Wii U did well with the fitness crowd, but it had no. But when it died because they made too many games that didn't belong on the Wii U that belonged on other consoles,
Yes, that's true. Um,
and motions and a lot of people. You hear the stories about people breaking furniture and tripping over and that. You know that isn't making stuff up. Nintendo had to shut down the Wii, or they would have been sued into oblivion for all the
all the
carnage.
oh my gosh.
Yeah, they were
Um,
getting sued. So, last question:
okay.
what do you like to do when you're not writing?
Mostly video games.
Mm. Yeah,
I'm a
me too.
homebody.
Actually started video games, and I wrote for video games. I never got anything published. I never. Uh, I tried to write lots of things other than other than books, because I always felt books were so undervalued, and why
Well,
would I be?
I play like I'll play video games, but also like another thing that I like to do for fun is language learning.
Well, that's interesting.
So I
Oh,
like
yeah, I should have
to
picked that up with the Japanese. How intense you are with the knowledge of Japanese. My
yeah.
knowledge
Well,
of Japanese is very.
I can if you I guess if you notice, I don't know if you've like on Twitter and Instagram and stuff like that. Like I make posts in Japanese. I'm pretty text literate with Japanese. But I don't know. I find language interesting. So like um I'll uh
I find
I'll
their mythology very interesting.
well, I don't know. I find languages as a mechanism is fundamentally fascinating, and so I'll start with like Japanese, and then I'll be like, well, now that I've kind of got a little bit of Japanese down, let's move to Korean, and then I'll be like, well, now that I'm kind of okay with these, other languages, I want to try Spanish again, and I don't know, like I just learning languages is just, I don't know, it's a fun thing for me.
I have
Um,
a learning disability, so since '96, I've been having difficulties learning anything new.
yeah. I'm an autodidact in that
Yeah.
I do better when I teach myself things. So I'll buy a textbook and read it, and then from there I'll find a friend
Yeah,
who just speaks that language and just talk
same,
to him until I start getting it down.
same. But I have a language barrier difficulty. I've been through learning words, but as soon as I don't have anybody speak with them or deal with them, not just it, it all goes away.
Yeah,
It
and
it doesn't. There's no development of it. You know.
the key there, I think the key that I think a lot of people miss is that social media is we talk about the dangers of social media a lot, and while
And
there
never
are
the
those,
advantages.
there are many advantages, as in because we live in the communication age, we have a reach that's unlike anything that has ever been seen ever. In
Yes.
that, like I have friends in Japan, I can talk to people all the way across the world instantaneously. And
Yeah.
so when it comes to like finding language partners, social media is your best friend. When I started learning Japanese, someone told me they were like the best way to learn a language is to go to the country that speaks that language. And I was like, well, I can't, I don't have the money to just up and go to Japan. And then I had this crazy idea. I was like, yeah, but with Twitter, I can bring it to me. I can just find people that speak that language. And a lot of people, most people, when you tell them that you're trying to learn their language. Really, I mean, most cultures are very accepting of that. There, a lot of people are happy that you're trying to learn their language, that you care enough
Especially
to do that.
Japan. That's one thing I did notice.
Oh
Japan,
yeah,
Vietnam, Korea, Thailand, they are way open to people learning their languages.
yeah.
China
Japan.
only sees it as a way of influencing you, but they are still happy that you learn Mandarin, not any other language, of course. All the other, they don't
Yeah,
exist officially, but yeah, if you really want to learn um, languages, yeah, you're more open to it. I think. I do think that I do have these mental blocks that I got to wear down,
yeah,
but I don't know. I mean, I know I have problems and I know I have difficulties, and I'm really amazed by the fact that sometimes, um, yeah, people just the way they, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, whatever. But Japanese, maybe, I don't know. I've tried, I struggle, and but I'm still amazed by the people who learn languages. I think it's an amazing thing because, again, language and writing is one of our greatest achievements. If,
yeah.
if
I mean,
writing is probably the greatest achievement. Yeah,
language is this fascinating thing to me because it's a mechanism. It was not
yeah,
it's invented. Like, language has one, communication is the sole purpose. And so I think when you, I have a blog post about it, but I think when you take something and simplify it and you say, okay, language is for communication, and all a book is, all a story is it is a bunch of words that coincide to concepts, and you take those words and you put them in a particular combination and you have an idea. And
yeah,
that is the that's the simplification of language. And once you understand that, hey, all I'm doing is taking these concepts and stringing them together in a certain way and getting different results from it that way, you begin to take something and it becomes less of this amorphous uh, art and more of like a science. I think of storytelling as a science. I don't think of it as an art. I definitely think of it as a science. Because, like with the hero with a thousand faces, Joseph Campbell essentially what he's saying is that every story is a collaboration of certain human archetypes, and that's what he gets with all these myths that he studies, because he was a 20th century mythologist. And one of the things he gets is that all of these stories tell the same. His whole theory was that all of these stories tell the same story, the human story. And so
yeah. I've read it.
when you
I've
begin to
read it from a
realize
different
that
perspective, from an analysis perspective,
yeah, when you begin to
and
realize that every story is these archetypes, you
yeah,
begin to think, oh, what archetypes am I using? How am I using them?
mm,
um, you're building the house. That's all you're
yeah,
doing. You're building the house.
yeah. I think a lot of people, they get told not to use stereotypes. Sorry, they work for a reason. But we don't call them stereotypes anymore. They're called tropes because there are
Yeah,
lots
tropes
of
for
them.
sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, that people like them, but the only thing is that you have to do them slightly differently than the other person, or else they become dry. And so you
I
got to
don't.
find some way to
I
moisten
don't.
them up.
No, I think it goes back to what you said. You've got to use them appropriately.
Yes, exactly. Yeah,
You
anything
don't throw a
using.
monkey. You don't throw a fool into a serious situation unless you have uh, comedic timing.
Yes. I mean, yeah, exactly. Anything used appropriately is going to come off well, because the only
Yeah.
reason something doesn't work is because it's not appropriate.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think I know we can break down each other's work and go through them all and compare them to classical works. But one of the reasons why they're classical works, and maybe Campbell has pointed it out, but I think it resonates with people because they can see that story in real life.
Yeah, and also another thing, well, like one of the things that's so interesting about fantasy, because I write epic dark fantasy. So one of the things that's so
Yeah,
interesting about that is that fantasy arises at a very interesting point in history. Uh, Typically, when we think of like the beginning of fantasy, we think of Tolkien's The Hobbit, which The Hobbit was published in 39.
Mm-hmm.
So The Hobbit is published at the end of World War One, which was the largest scale war ever known, and it's leading into what will be the one that tops that one.
The
And
worst of
so
them.
you
Yeah.
have this world where, I mean, in the early 20th century, people thought the world was coming to an end. They see all of this destruction at a level that had never been seen, with technology that was horrific. Because you got to
Yeah.
think, back then there was no Geneva Convention, so there's just mustard gas, and I mean, it's just this brutal carnage. And so you see these people of this time, they think the world is coming to an end. And so fantasy arises as this strange little escape, because that's what people wanted. They wanted to escape. And so the thing about fantasy that's interesting is that when you read fantasy, typically you want to see yourself there. And so what I always say is that fantasy only works if it in some way mirrors the real world. Because we want to find our footing there. We want to find ourselves in that world. That's why people resonate with characters so much, is because we see ourselves in those characters, or those characters give us.
Even if it's our ideal self or what we want to be, more likely.
Yeah, even if it's that, or even if it's a tragic character and we see our flaws in that character, we feel sympathy for them.
Yeah.
One of the things I've said before is we side with the eyes we see through. Like Philip Pullman has a speech called "Magic Carpets." It's on the responsibility of the writer, and one of the things that Philip Pullman says is he talks about how where we place the camera is important for who we side with in that story. So, as an example, if a story begins and it's a thief, and the thief he's in a dark house and he's rummaging through the drawers, and then suddenly there are headlights coming in the driveway, we think to ourselves, hurry up, hurry up, hurry up. We don't even take into consideration that, hey, this guy's breaking the law, because we've seen through his eyes, so we side with him. We're seeing, we give him the benefit of the doubt because we see through his eyes. And that's the power. I mean, I guess in a way that's the power of the camera, but that also goes into, we've attached ourselves to this character. I don't want to say anthropomorphic because that's not the correct word, but you get what I'm saying.
No, it's empathy, but a special type of empathy.
Yeah,
transposition. I think it's a transposition, or
I think I don't think
transposing yourself onto imposition of the character and swapping position.
Yeah, we'll say that. Well, I don't know the other word. I don't know the right word for it, but yeah, we'll say that.
I'm not sure. I'm trying to think of it, because I remember that there used to be many ways, right, of empathy, etc. But ever since Star Wars, everything's tried to be the hero's journey, which is why I tried to be different, because I think one of the reasons why so many books fail is because it's another Harry Potter book,
Right. Another
I've
thing.
already read Tolkien. I'm not going to read. I'm not going to read the story of the elves because I already did in Tolkien. I'm
Right. Yeah.
Or I'm a Warhammer guy. People are becoming very tribalism in their IPs.
Right.
I think and if you're not different, you're never going to build your own brand. I think right now we are dividing into the world of then and now, whereas
right.
the nows are writing the same stories over and over again, and the thens are still yet to emerge where, like me, who are trying to write the stories into the future.
Right.
See, fantasy is the looking back. The science fantasy is fantasy but looking forward.
Yes, very much so.
And those science fantasy is the largest genre. It is the smallest selling genre. Yet
Oh
there
yeah.
is a few very notable exceptions. Star Wars is science fantasy. Most manga is science fantasy.
Yes.
It is the emerging genre, in my opinion. But I've always been I started with fantasy, but then I got introduced. See, my mum, she introduced me to The Hobbit and then Lord of the Rings. But she also took me to see Star Trek and Star Wars.
Yeah. I gotcha. Yeah.
So
No.
I got hit with falling in love with elves and spaceships. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
and then again, it comes down to what you said about the eyes. And so, like, I could imagine somebody living today, their inspirations are going to be Nintendo, Sony.
Yes.
They aren't going to be novels. You know what I mean?
Yeah. A lot of it.
Because
Yeah. A lot of it is.
today's novel video games are novels, and I forget the name of this Russian writer. He was born just at the time where he was maturing when the Soviet Union collapsed, so he became a post-Soviet writer by default.
Yeah.
And the thing is, I think he's only written for video games.
Oh yeah.
He wrote the story for Stalker. I think it has been published, or no, not Stalker. Sorry, Metro.
Okay.
So he wrote the story with video games in mind. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Which is different from most books, and yet also from the perspective of most books, it became a successful video game.
Yeah.
Which is
Yeah.
especially
I
rare,
think that's a
given
big
that
thing.
he's Russian, and the attitude, not only now, but back then, the attitude towards Russians hasn't really changed.
Right. Right.
It's amazing. I mean, I like the different genres. I think it's like, as I was saying before, one of the reasons why the book in the bookshops died is because they got rid of the niche
Right.
in order to fit more
They got
Patterson
the
and
same thing. Yeah.
Rock.
It's more just the
Yeah.
same thing. Yeah. It's saturated.
And you may see bookshops full of people, but do you see them full of purchasers?
Right. 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 Yeah. That's true. Yeah.
But I wouldn't recommend anybody racing out and taking a publishing deal that puts you in a bookshop, because there's the trap.
Yeah. I think so in certain ways. Yeah. Because it is slowly the end of it. So were there any
Final
other?
words, final thoughts. Yes, final
Yeah.
thoughts.
Final thoughts. Well, I mean, it was great. This was great, man. I really enjoyed this.
Yeah,
It's good to sit down and talk
I
about
mean,
writing and stuff, and I really always enjoy doing that.
yeah.
I will send you real quick. I'll send you my the links to all my books, and
I have already put one of the links in, and your author's page. I wanted to put the link. I'm going to send you a copy of my book, although it is being edited right now. Because,
okay.
when I got it edited, I publish it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I've done 10 editions since.
Oh no.
But somebody
Okay.
said, can you please edit your book? Please, please, please. So I did it again.
Yeah.
So, but it's not ready, but it hasn't come back to me yet. But I'm going to send you the 10th edition, but it's not the one that's going to be published. Okay.
Okay.
But
Well,
it's
thank
just for
you. I
you to read.
appreciate that.
Yeah. It's
Alrighty.
just a PDF for you to read. And if you could just send me your website and the other links that you want to add, and I'll add them, because I could just edit across the board.
Okay. Yeah. I'll send them. I'll send them as soon as we get off.
Right.
You mean to send them on Twitter?
Well, I'm going to email you the book, so you can just reply the email.
Okay, sounds good to me. Yeah, I'll do that.
Yeah.
Anyway, well, it was great talking to you. I really enjoyed this. Thank you for the opportunity.
And I think hopefully a lot of writers will understand why long form works, and that the myth of short attention spans is Basically, just that. It's Hollywood trying to get you to not read.
Right. Yeah. 100%.
100%. Because they only make money when you are lazy and watch movies. And it's the same with audiobooks. Please, I'm going to probably stop soon publishing my stuff in audiobook and probably even pull them. I suddenly realize now what a trap they are. And it's just a way to drain money off you.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
it's terrible.
I'll send you.
Basically, everybody's raced out and produced one now, and ASX won't publish mine. I had to get it done through Google, and Google used AI, of course, and half the company. Could you imagine Apple, one of the biggest AI companies, don't want AI audiobooks from outsiders? You have to go.
Well, I actually like to narrate. I have several stories on my YouTube, which I'll give you my YouTube too. I have several stories that I've narrated on my YouTube. I genuinely enjoy it, narrating and reading aloud.
Yeah.
All
I've been
right.
asked to narrate. It's just I never find the time to do it because I overwrite sometimes. I think, or that's what I've been accused of. But it's my genre, it's my style.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people don't like it, but I'm a visual writer, not a dialogue writer. Or
Right.
even though it's single character driven story, there are lots of characters because I believe that it takes an entire village.
Right.
I guess those are all the different. Basically, because again, if you look at all the manga and animes I've mentioned, they're all big casts.
Right. Yeah. Right. They are. All right.
So, thanks everybody for coming. And
Sorry, my camera wasn't working, but you have my
so yeah,
avatar to
I
look
couldn't
at.
figure out myself what's happened.
Yeah, it's fine. My avatar works.
Screen share, but it
Yeah.
doesn't matter. I mean,
All right.
I
Well, I
think
wait.
people like seeing the faces, but still, most of the audience will come over the next couple of weeks. I usually give you 2 weeks before I do another interview because as soon as you do another video, the next videos, the videos immediately lose their audience.
Right. Well,
You know.
all right. Well, I await your email, and it was great talking to you.
Take care. I'm just gonna hit end stream now.
All righty.
Bye now.
Bye.